Okay, let's see if this is working or if it's not working. It's working! All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Hash Church, Season 11, Episode 44. I kind of can't believe it, but we are here. It is episode 44. It's been a great year. First year in a very long time that we have done Hash Church all the way through and not missed a single episode. So, pretty stoked on that. Just going to mute these two Hash Churches and we will get off to a wonderful start. I'll let Joshua and Caleb in, and ever so quickly, I am going to mention our sponsors because, yeah, got to mention the sponsors. They've been so good to us. So we'll start out with our good friends at the Press Club, trusted by top hash makers from around the world since 2016. The Press Club is your one-stop shop for award-winning solventless gear, from press bags to wash bags to press vessels. You'll find everything you need from wash to press. We are big fans of the Press Club and what they're doing in the community, so we're really excited to have them on board as an official sponsor for Hash Church. It's made in the USA. They've got the patented pink stitch, zero blowout guarantee. It's a small family-owned business, free expedited shipping over $75, and international shipping available. You can visit them at www.thepressclub.co and you can use the code HashChurch to take 10% off your purchase. So yeah, those guys are awesome. Really like them. I'm hoping sometime next year getting them actually on the show. Uh, Elevate your sessions at Hash Church with Puffco's cutting edge lineup, starting with the innovative Pivot, a pocket-sized dab pen that delivers the full rig experience on the go, featuring a quick release 3D chamber for premium flavor and real-time temperature control with 4 heat presets and haptic feedback. For epic group rips, you would want to dive into the Puffco Peak Pro, powered by revolutionary 3D XL bowl technology. That offers a 78% larger chamber for 2 times more vapor. Even heating from the sides to preserve terpenes. I'm not sure how heating from the sides preserves terpenes, but it definitely volatilizes them into my brain. And an XL joystick for fuller loads with less reclaim. So don't miss the new Proxy, the modular portable powerhouse with 4 precision heat sittings, fast 90-minute charging, boost mode for intense hits, and easy disassembly for seamless cleaning. I got to admit, I have absolutely been loving the new Proxy. Perfect for any adventure. I can prove that. I took mine to Joffrey Lake. Support Puffco's game-changing innovations by heading to puffco.com or follow them at Puffco on Instagram today. Last but not least, I got to shout out my company, Bubble Bags. We stand out as the premier choice for water hash extraction, and it's no surprise why. We are the original innovators who set the standard for quality and performance, crafted with durability in mind. Our bags come with a lifetime warranty, ensuring you're covered for years of consistent use. The team behind Bubble Bags takes pride in our pioneering legacy, backing every product with unwavering confidence and a commitment to excellence, making them the trusted go-to for enthusiasts and professionals alike seeking top-tier hash extraction results. You can check us out at www.bubblebag.com and you can use the HashChurch10 for a 10% discount. I have been mentioning every week though, bubble bags are on sale, 50% off, and that 10% will stack on that 50, which will give you 60% off. I think that's a pretty good deal. Anyway, how's it going, everybody? I was not sure Etienne was going to make it. My goodness, my brother. I know you're good and happy, but I hate to see you in a hospital bed, brother. Holy shit.
That makes two of us. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly, bro. Holy shit. So you got
Excellent.
some crazy pinched ass nerve in your back and leg and stuff going on?
Yeah, I got a pinched nerve in my hip,
Oh,
which basically has been debilitating for the past week. So I ended up in the VA hospital, which they've been treating me very well. And I am going home today. So it's just due to daylight savings time here in America, till Asian hour. So yeah, I'm looking forward to puffing a big fat joint and puffing on my Puffco when I get.
dude, I'll tell you, this getting older is no fun. I also have a hip thing since I broke my coccyx on my dirt bike many years ago. I worked yoga and, all of these different things. And I just, I found the only thing, and it's still there, but the only reason I'm not in a hospital bed is because I work out, I weight train about 3 times a week. And I don't weight train an enormous amount of weight, but I've I've strengthened enough of my body around that area that I can always kind of feel it, but I'm not debilitated by a pinch. And I guarantee you, it would definitely travel in that direction of sciatic nerve
Well,
pinching, etc.
and then I found, of course, some arthritis and some grinding in there too, so that all adds to the fun. But yeah, I did something to a muscle that pushed a nerve, and
Oh,
I couldn't walk. And if you've ever had that sensation,
I
it's
have.
the worst.
Well, it's
So
terrifying.
yeah. Well, especially my wife. Shout out to my wife Donna. She was a trooper through all this. Because yeah, I could not get to the hospital or drive. In fact,
Wow.
I couldn't even make it to the VA hospital originally. I had to go to Kaiser in Richmond because I couldn't make it across the bridge to San Francisco because I was in so much pain.
My
And
goodness.
but yeah. So I'm working on that right now. I'm working on some strengthening of that area, and I will be doing weights and other things to make sure my 56-year-old ass doesn't have that shit happen again.
Well, let me know if you need some
Woo.
exercises, man. I got all mine from my son. He's, kind of really
Yeah,
focused on this getting strong.
put together the list, man. I'd love to see it, to review it. I'm humble enough to learn always.
Yeah, it's super chill. I mean, it's certainly probably nothing that you don't know or anything. I just was happy that my son could put it together for me in order, and then I could just follow that. And it's funny when we take care of ourselves, whether you're doing yoga or weight training or whatever it is, you're always kind of like, wow, it's really working. Like it's weird when I'm not like a lazy ass and I get off my ass and I like lift weights and, exercise. It works. It's like, yeah, no shit. I posted it on Twitter the other day. I said, I see a lot of people willing to take a bullet for their friends and family, but are you willing to get healthy for them? Are you willing to exercise? Are you willing to eat a better diet? Are you willing to make sacrifices for them? And you see a lot less people posting that. You'll see them, I'll take a bullet for my family. It's like, dude, let's just get healthy for our families. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, trying to stay healthy, trying to be healthy. Welcome to Caleb, as well as Joshua, Dutch Blooms in the house. It's good to see both of you guys.
Hello, hello.
We were supposed to
Hello,
get
hello.
Dutch last week, and I think him and his whole family got the plague.
Bro, we did, and it's still sitting in my lungs, and it's the worst time of year, when flowers coming down, and I want to taste so many things, and I'm
This is
having to hold
definitely not the
myself
time of
back.
year to lose the olfactory.
Right, totally. So I think I was texting you earlier today. Yesterday I finally got my first wash of the year going down, which was I decided usually I start with the Bicket last because it's like 6%. And so it's just like raining bucket, and it feels so good. But I decided to lead with that, and put myself in a good mood and filled up like 3 or 4 trays of high quality hash. And it's not all quite dry, but I got a little bit here. I'm gonna probably rip on and probably hack a bunch too because my lungs are hurting. And I probably should be taking a big dab, like that. But I needs to.
The expectorant qualities are going to be coming out shortly, is what you're
Yeah, I
saying.
might have to go mute and maybe even off screen.
That's hilarious. Or
Yeah,
don't. Just be Johnny B. Just come in, take your big
the
dab, and then
sweat just
cough
coming out.
for like 15 minutes while everyone will be like, John, mute your mic. Jesus Christ. Well, good for you. And tell us more about that cultivar.
Yeah, so my buddy Nick actually made it or accidentally found it, which is how the greats kind of come out.
Always my
And
favorites.
so it's a GMO with a cherry pie
Oh,
that
fuck.
hermed onto it. And it takes about 12 weeks. It looks a lot like GMO, less calyxy and speary, but it yields huge and it adds the gas and just a tiny bit of cherry, mostly gas, and it just where I like GMO, so I'll start there. I do like a little GMO, but it's not my go-to all day, every day. It's kind of novelty thing because it doesn't have the gas, and so for whatever reason, therapeutically and mentally, it just isn't something that I want to keep coming back to all day, every day, even though I do like it. But add the gas to it, and it just fucking rips, bro. And I've had this for maybe 6, 7 years, and I just like it more and more and more. and it performs as a plant. It stands up against a lot of the mildew and septoria diseases. It's even though it's 12 weeks too out here in Minnesota, because of the timing, when we get that first rainstorm, September ish, the buds are so small it doesn't fucking matter. And then so it can, if you can kind of get a little bit of longer season in that second wind, it ends up finishing outdoors really well. Like this was the last plants I pulled. I pulled them down 3 days ago, and anyways, I really like this one. I'll have to give Chua a little sample.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're somehow avoiding septoria, blight, whatever they call that fucking plague. Oh my God.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. Like I know a lot of people are talking about it, and I kind of, yeah, and the West Coast hasn't really hit it, so I kind of shirked it. Honestly, when I was on the West Coast, like, you guys probably just don't got good soil health, or all the cocky things you think in your head, even about your friends. And then I got out here and right promptly saw some last year. It wasn't too bad. Thought I'd be kind of more up on it this year with a better mulch and better soil nutrition, and it defies like all the rules. People will say, "Oh, I'm looking for these. I'm breeding for resistance, and it or this and that," and it really defies all the rules. And the parts where I have composted from last year and have really nice heavy mulch and removed all the leaves, it's there just as heavy as it is everywhere else. I have a plant, the same cultivar, 20 feet apart. Getting all the same nutrients, all the same treatment, and one has it heavily and one doesn't. I'm just like, I don't understand this thing. And I think that it's Septoria is not the appropriate name. I
Right.
just saw a post from Brandon Rust that
Ah,
Medicinal Genomics had done some testing
yep.
and found out. I just saw the post like 2 days ago. And so I don't remember the name, but there's a name for it. And it's basically way worse than Septoria. Um, and I kind of thought it was this maybe a cannabis specific thing, but it's not. The When I texted you that farms are shutting down, I wasn't talking cannabis farms. I was talking tomato farms and pepper farms, and just
Oh,
like I have a friend whose parents run a mercantile, and one of their vendors makes preservatives and jams and salsas, and they lost their entire crop this year, and they had to just shut it down. They couldn't keep their vendor space, because their crop loss. And it's just it's a big deal, and we don't really have it figured it out. And it's going to be one of those. I kind of just feel like one of those, COVID, one of those banana pandemic
fuck.
potato thing, funguses. Something
That's
that
what
we're
we
just going to
need.
like get beat up for a minute, and we have to like build natural immunity towards. And
What
and and
what's Brandon's Instagram? I have him, but I
he
only
has a
see him
new
when he
he has a
comes
new
up.
one. Let me see if I can find it.
I hate the shadow ban of the cannabis industry. It is so fucking lame.
I
It's
had to ask. It's like a new thing with
unbelievable.
his logo. I'm like, is that you, dude? He's like, yeah, it's me. I'm like, tell me something secret that only you and I know.
Well, I will tell you one thing. My partners, my old partners, because we're not partners anymore, but my old partners in Michigan, the Rolganic crew, they grow 17 acres. And, obviously they had major problems with this over the years. And I think it was just last year that they ended up just breaking down and not mulching, but putting plastic. And they're, organics, living soil type thing, but they just were like, we got to do it, right? And it was unfortunate because, Josh and Kelly saw it and kind of put a nice little attack on them in the public, and they were just like devastated. They were like, "Oh my God, like we'll lose everything if we don't." So they laid this plastic down and they got none. None. It
Really?
was, yeah, he just said it bounces up from the ground. It's like, and even from mulch, it bounces. Like, it's like it doesn't bounce off the fucking this cover that they put up. I mean, they had 17 acres. I don't know how many plants, thousands and thousands of
Right, right,
plants. And they were doing like, they certainly weren't looking to, cut corners. They were when they were doing their, by hand to all 8,000 plants on their hands and knees, walking to each plant to do the next one to put their
right.
bokashi and all their, kind of nutrients and whatnot, doing it all by hand. They were breaking like the hardest laborers, like people that were so used to labor were just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, how can you do this? It's impossible. So it's not like they were like, let's just cut corners and call ourselves organic, but like, well, okay, they were organic, but yes, they had these plastic covers that Josh and Kelly weren't overly happy about. So I kind of called him up. I was like, dude, those people, they look up to you so much. And at the time, he was like, oh, sorry, man, I'm just pulling tarps right now. I'm a bit busy. I'm like, oh, you're pulling tarps? What are your tarps made out of? And there's this long pause, and then he goes, metal, and bursts into laughing, because he knows his tarps are made out of plastic.
Dude, one of yeah, but most of us may have heard of this guy Joel Salatin, and he's like
Joel,
my
man, come on, the
yeah, dude,
lunatic.
lunatic farmer. And his one of the things I remember when I was delving into regenerative farming and gardening and learning, and he just stuck out as someone that I kind of mentored me from his education, and he
Sure.
would talk about the best thing that plastic made was electric fencing. This portable electric fencing where they could move their cows around and increase the fertility of the soil by mimicking the herd type thing. And so I think that we just kind of have to realize that these are tools. And yes, we went crazy. The pendulum went crazy in the 80s and 90s, and plastic cups at every keg and everything
Yeah.
we could imagine, and it's everywhere. And so we have to swing it back. But his point, then I agree with this 100%. One of the best things we can do with plastic is use it conservatively in agriculture,
Yeah.
because it can help so many. It can
Well, we need
deal
to
with.
use it conservatively in everything. The problem is plastic is so much a part of the world. Like
Right.
the world would probably stop turning if we just stopped using plastic. Like half of the
Yeah.
things in the hospital room where Etienne is right now wouldn't exist. I mean, plastic is fucking major, and it's not like I want to defend it, but I talked to this environmental group the other day, and he was talking about, oh, can you put the depot up on the Lions Bay website so people can know they can bring their recyclables? And I just went on, so I went on Grok actually, and I was like, I wonder what percentage of recyclables even get recycled, and it
Oh,
is bad, bro.
it's
No, it's
so
not good.
bad.
It's not
But
I
good.
but Dutch, you bring up a very good point. Caleb, last year we were together in Geneva, New York, at the U.S. government's grow there, run by Cornell, and the homogeneous field, which had what the 500 plus ascensions. Um, the field itself was covered in plastic. But when we went to the other fields that had septoria, they were not. Do you remember that, Caleb? Am I incorrect in that? Because I do not remember seeing septoria on the homogeneous field. Correct me if I'm wrong.
There might have been a few, but for the field without the plastic is the one that they were running the experiments on. So definitely that splashback is it.
It's
Yeah,
totally
it's
it's
very
totally
real.
it. And I was
Yeah.
gonna say, one technique that I learned sort of accidentally, and I think that in general, actually, this will start to shift the way we produce cannabis outdoors and for hash, is the later planting. So I've never grown big plants. I'm an indoor grower that moved to greenhouse that has been doing outdoor. And then the last 2 years since I moved, I haven't had my other tools. And so I've only been doing outdoor, and I've been learning a lot because I've been focusing on it. And so I thought, oh, my friend Nick in Michigan, not too far from here, grows these huge plants. I'm going to grow huge plants. I can do it, and just kind of wanted to do that cocky, cool thing. And I grew some medium sized plants, to be honest. I got some 6 7 footers. They weren't huge like the big boys, but I was proud of what I grew. But the big ones got the septoria, the big ones got the disease, or ones that I had forgotten about and thrown in the last minute. They grow up 36 inches, big stocky donkey dicks, like exactly what you want. This is very little to, if any, pest pathogen, just like boom, stacking bins. It was a night and day difference. And it is at the same time I was
Well,
observing that. I was observing my friend Ital Foundation in California, and he's growing, like 5 6 10 acres, like a lot. And they're just doing biomass, and they're just plant harvest, plant harvest, all the way up through like August, I think, even, you know what I mean? And I just really kind of learned, like, the less time that the plant has the ability to get infected by anything, the better. And so we can change up our
well,
practices. We've come
well,
into this slowly. Just, I'll let you go, Etienne, in just a second. We've come into this from the mindset of tent growers and underground, small scale type thing, and we just, in technology, anyways, things are shifting, and we're going to be able to plant more plants later, and seeds and all the other stuff. So go ahead, Etienne.
well, it gets me to thinking, right? Because Marcus is correct. Plastic is everywhere. They're finding plastics in pieces in all different parts of our bodies right now. So if that's a thing, and as you say, Dutch, let's look at alternatives. What would be a realistic alternative then to covering, your crop, right? Plastic's been the cheapest, right? Because you can get more yard per square for the cheapest amount. But with something like a Titan woven canvas, and things like that, what would, I'm
They do
not an
make
industrial
those, and
grower
they're
here.
not as widely used because they're not as easily to attach into equipment. But they do make similar to cardboard or paper rolls, And I've even gone on what's that company, Uline, and bought corrugated cardboard, to roll out, like in situations where I didn't have time and I needed to kill grass in order to plant something. I bought the corrugated rolls of it and just rolled it
Yeah.
out and then put mulch on top. So I think it's a technology and money thing. You know what I mean? Like once we stop buying from Burger King and stop buying at Whole Foods, start buying at Whole Foods, the paradigm shifts and people start making the stuff that works the way we need it to work.
Yeah,
Right. We would take
absolutely.
carpets when I worked for Ed Rosenthal when we had to cover, like, we didn't want to have to deal with the grass at the grows outside, taking carpets and flipping them upside down so the back, the fuzzy stuff's down, was an alternative that was accessible and easier because we didn't want, the plastic, because also, depending on if how it's tread, plastic's going to break down as well, but not to
I
the
will,
point where it biodegrades.
yeah, I also will say, like, on the like bigger spec picture sort of thing, I don't think that it is going to solve the problem by putting masks on us and isolating, to try to bring that analogy. I would rather that we built resistance biologically than,
Exactly.
through practice. I think that's really what has weakened humans. That is what has weakened plants. All of us, I just want to wave that flag really hard.
Yeah,
Well,
I
this
think
is
that's
where
a good flag.
Arturo Oh, yeah, this is where Arturo, the guy who we were talking with regarding CRISPR technology, this is where that type of technology once isolated, right? If, we're able to isolate what chromosomes are affected by this, then yes, you could, create and breed in those things agriculturally. Not
Yeah, I think
cheap, but it's
the
real.
Well,
the
I'm
one thing,
guessing I'm guessing you can also, sorry, Colin, I'll just make a quick point and welcome my brother. Um, oh, and I hope I don't lose this point because I haven't even puffed yet today. Um, yeah, I lost it. You go ahead, Colin.
let's just puff right now, and then it'll come back to you. I swear. I know it's gonna
This
happen.
this is
All
my
right.
first real hash hit in a while. I've been out of hash for maybe 6 months, and so I've been
Oof,
like,
bro,
yeah,
What are you
bro.
make the
talking
call the
about,
bat
dude? What
phone
the
when you get that
fuck?
happens, dude. You got my
I got
number.
I have weed, but I just hadn't. I don't have a cold room, so I couldn't even make it.
You got
I've
my
been
number.
waiting
You
for the
called me a
call.
couple days ago or a few days ago, or a week ago when I was harvesting. We chatted for a while. But on the topic of like covering with plastics or mulch or whatever it might be, I'm a firm believer that mulching um is a more cost effective depending on your region where you are, of course, because there's those that'll be like, man, I can't get it for X because I'm in a particular region, but using wood chips and things that are, byproduct of what's on the land to help over time, that'll help your soil biome as well. And you're not paying for things that you're going to rip out and spend labor on. And it factually in particular areas, and I've done the cost benefit analysis of all this stuff, plastic is more expensive. It
Oh,
costs
it's a
more.
100% more expensive. My friends just found that plastic had zero blight and
Right.
the mulch had quite a bit.
Sure. So that's a very good point.
On a 17-acre field, right? So it always becomes the same thing with this sort of cannabis thing, especially when you go that big. For me, I'm with Dutch, like let's just breed these resistances into the genetics. Let's grow the right
Yep.
genetics. I invited Ryan Lee. I'm hoping he's going to pop in here in a little bit because I'd love to hear him speak to the point of like poor breeding practices, like inbreeding and breeding bad genetics. And although they look amazing in a tent, they're like, oh wow, look at this. I got like a 5% return to rosin and it's
Right.
beautiful and amazing, but it's like but what's going on inside the plant? Like, are we weakening that plant and those genetics to the point where when they get put out into a field, they just literally are like a magnet for mold and mildew and these microbial counts? It definitely seems like that's got to be a part of it. That if we just all make seeds in tents, by the way, tents are also plastic, pumping those out as much as we can. I mean, most of the housing of your indoor lights are plastic. All of the tubes to feed your plants are plastic. I mean, holy fuck, Jesus Christ, the bongs that you guys are puffing out of right now have plastic in them. Everything, all of the computers that we're using, my headphones, I mean, holy shit, this is like a seriously difficult thing to remove ourselves. And I love the aspect of the regenerative mentality, because it does, that if you follow that Kelly and Josh mentality, it really does lead you to this more conscious place but it also leads you to this place where it's like, wow, like how much do I have to do to reduce hypocrisy in my life right now? You know what I mean? If I want to say I don't want to do this, how far can I follow that to not do that? It's a
Well, and
difficult one.
it's a huge. You got to weigh the benefits and the cost, because we literally wouldn't know about regenerative if it wasn't for technology. Like, we put on conferences, we get on the internet and talk about this stuff. Like, all this positive things have been spread and information, right? That's just one example that would
Yep.
not have existed, and it would have been way fucking slow, but there's it's the yin and the yang that comes with everything. I've been listening to, like regenerative lifestyle, homesteading lifestyle, and preppers, like, there's a fine line, type thing. And so I find myself listening to some prepper guys here and there, and sometimes I'll fall down that shadow for a few weeks, and I kind of have recently. And I feel like it's really good for me because I step back and I think about these things. And shoot, for instance, yesterday I was making hash and I was setting up my hash tech that I just got last year. It's maybe my fifth run on it, sixth run, I don't know. And I spent 4 days setting the motherfucker up, getting the water, getting the freezer, doing all these things. I had to make a couple trips to the hardware store to get plumbing right. And I got it to the first wash, and I made a mistake and spilt all my hash into my 45 thing and had to pull it all out into a bucket. I did that twice, dude, yesterday. I spent an entire day. I ended up making good hash, but I was just laughing at myself. I was like, man, if I could be paddling buckets right now, and I could have gone through 20,000 grams. Instead, I like, in the long run, of course, the technology is what I want to do, but it was just kind of funny as I was listening to all these things and realizing how much energy I just put into like making this technology make it easier for me versus like the 7 days of paddling that I could have done.
Yeah, no, I think what you're highlighting is like mistakes at any level and any point in your career are going to happen, and that's true. I mean, we're human. We think about a lot, and cognitively, you can only really obtain so much at any given time. We believe that we're superhumans at times, and I think it's a good call out, Dutch, that you're saying that because we all do stuff like that. I mean, I've mixed up bags and been like, oh my God, we got to go back and redo exactly what you just said. Drop it all in the water and drop it back through the bags again. Um, Plenty of times over the years, and it's only human, I mean, we're trying to think about things, especially when you're trying to look at intimate details of a process that you've done so many times. It's much like music. You fall into things, and sometimes those happy mistakes make brilliant innovations, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for taking those risks like you are, where you're like spending all this time setting it up by yourself. Because, using a machine like that by yourself is it takes days to set it up, to commission it, right? To your point, and get it like running. And then you're like, okay. But in your mind, you're like, oh, I already got it running. Let's just drop it in, when probably you should have paused, right? And you didn't think about it. And it happens, man.
I had never
Um,
done continuous wash. And I thought,
yeah,
oh, I'll do
right.
continuous wash. And then I thought, oh, I'll throw ice in the bottom of the bin. So there was all these factors that changed. And
Totally.
now my bags weren't draining right. And that's what happened. I went to go, I was like, fuck, my bags aren't draining. And I had to shake them, and it slipped. And it was this it was just,
See,
this new
that
system.
is
And
why we came out with the vibratory screens.
oh,
So
dude, I wanted that
our
so bad
vibratory
yesterday.
screens, they
Dude.
were never to collect hash. So you could see
Yeah.
the companies that copied it and they created these stainless steel screens for collecting hash. Well, that's very hard to collect hash off stainless steel screens. If you look at what we set up, we have a dewatering process where your water's going through, it's removing the hash, it's vibrating, and then it's going out of a little, an exit and into a
Yep.
bag or into a bucket full of bags. And that way your bags aren't getting fuller and fuller and fuller without your water being able to drain. So hey, I wanted to welcome Brandon Rust. We were talking about him just, geez, I'd say 4 or 5 minutes ago. Dutch Bloom had mentioned him. I follow him on Instagram, although his Instagram recently got popped away, as our Instagrams do in the cannabis industry. So you can go check him out at Full Crop, FULCROP sciences, SCIENCES _ Welcome, Brandon.
Going on, guys? What's up? How's
Fuck,
everybody doing?
dude, way to just like jump in, bro. Like I literally hit you up 5 minutes ago. I'm like, you want to come on Hash Church? You're like, yeah, dude, I'll come on Hash Church.
Yeah, I mean, it's Sunday, and I usually just spend my Sundays cleaning my house and doing gardening work and stuff. So, you didn't catch me at a busy time. I'm actually right here in my little command center where I have a bunch. I've been popping a lot of seeds and stuff like that. So I've got a couple of small tents aside from my, my
Beautiful.
actual flowering room, my big room.
Nice. Those look
That's
healthy.
my shed outside, but I got some chem dog across the Black Line Reserve right here, which I'm during their like second day of flowering.
Okay. Yeah, we've just been kind of
Bro, I
talking
bet
about
that's so good.
we've been talking about blight and Septoria, and Joshua was like, "Oh, it's not Septoria. I think Brandon knows what it is. It's something else."
Yeah, yeah. So actually, what ended up happening was, I do a lot of like stuff with microbes and stuff. Oh, hold on 1 second.
Awesome. We live in a microbial world, so it's never a bad thing to do stuff with microbes. We got Dr. Mark will be popping in here later today as well. He's celebrating a birthday today. I am clearly insane. It's my 30th wedding anniversary today, and here I am doing Hash Church. Haven't even spoken with my wife yet today, but happy anniversary, sweetie.
Okay, so I work with a lot of different types of microbes, and I'm always looking at, I kind of coined a term called biological crop steering, and it's using practices similar to agronomy where you use, timing, placement, and the amount of what you put. It all makes a huge difference in, commercial crop production. And I found different ways to utilize different microbes based off of their the metabolites that they produce to elicit certain responses at certain times. And one of the things that we're looking at is dual efficacy against pathogens while, simultaneously increasing things like nutrient use efficiency or the solubility and uptake of nutrients. And so I'm always like, looking at different stuff. And, recently, I think for a lot of us, we've been experiencing, especially if you're doing any outdoor, the fungal spot pathogen. And well, I initially thought it was leaf septoria, but last year it was the first time I really seen it in any like real capacity where it was like noticeable and noticeably affecting like plant yield and quality. And so this year, what I did was I did a couple of experiments where I took the combination, the Bacillus subtilis trichoderma and the Beauveria bassiana combination. I did some inoculations real early in the season and throughout the season just to see how effective it would be to control this spot pathogen. And what I also did is I took leaf samples, not just from from the cannabis, but from like the oaks around me, some weeds that are around me, and just different plants. And what we found out, and I sent those all to medicinal genomics for, because I CanMed earlier this year in Puerto Rico, and I was talking to Kevin McKernan about, what this potentially could be. And so he's like, well, let's figure it out. And so I sent that all off, and it didn't hit at all for Septoria. And I was And I kind of started figuring this like before we even tested, because I had told him, hey, I don't think this is septoria, and I want to figure out what it is, because the leaf spot septoria that affects cannabis is kind of like specific to cannabis. And what I was seeing was I was seeing a spot pathogen that was affecting the grass, it was affecting the oak trees, it was affecting the tomatoes, it was
Mhm.
affecting the cannabis. It was basically jumping from all these different crop species. So I was like, it's got to be something else. And then we all identified it as the alternaria, which is, a common alternaria is like tomato and potato blight. And so the problem with alternaria is that since it it has a wider range of species that infects, and it can jump from different species, it's it seems like it's more pathogenic, right? It's harder to deal with because it's not just cannabis associated, right? It's like you're going to have to do integrated pest management and not just treat your cannabis crops, but you're going to have to treat your grass and treat your trees and treat any of the plants that are around the area that you're cultivating in, because they can just hop between species. And then not only that, is the problem is it's also uh, a necrotropic fungus, which means it doesn't require a living host. And so what its whole thing is to basically kill its host, because it can still its canadia or its spores, they can form on the decaying dead composted material. And that's another reason why, like, and another thing, the reason why it's spreading so quickly is because when let's say we're like me as an organic farmer, I'll take a lot of my old material and I'll compost it, and stuff like that. And unless you're doing like thermophilic composting, you're not going to destroy those canaida or those
Can you
spores. And
can
so
you explain that? Because I think there's a lot of common not understanding between thermophilic and like lower temperature, like you're talking about.
yeah, so with thermophilic composting, you need to make sure that your carbon to nitrogen ratio is where it should be, so that way it heats up that compost over about 135 degrees. Essentially, it needs to start getting really hot. Kind of the hotter the better when we're talking about destroying
I think you have
pathogens.
to be like 100 over 140 for X amount of days, or over 165 for X amount of days, depending, right? A little bit less for the hotter, and that's a legal definition for compost, thermophilic compost, right?
Mhm.
Us
Yeah.
is sorry to interrupt, Brandon. I just kind of want to lay a little
Oh,
down so other
you're
folks understand.
Yep.
For us as more
It,
advanced gardeners, and when we know the inputs and stuff, we might lower the temperatures because we aren't concerned with the pathogens, but we want to increase the fungal mass and the fungal biodiversity, which gets killed off at 130. And so we've used these other techniques, and I think that, I guess, one technique that will work is thermophilic composting, getting that shit really hot, and then when you do that, you kill everything, and then what builds back is what is beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is too, is after you do a thermophilic composting, or after you're trying to like get rid of those microbes, just to be on the safe side, you can go and re-inoculate that compost with beneficial microbes, like effective microorganisms like the Micro Plus that I have, or um like Terabiotics, EM. All those beneficial microorganisms can help outcompete some of these things, but also understanding like this thing it's really rampant, and so many of us has seen it like really become widespread, and it's really damaging. Like what happens is, because of it's necrotropic, it doesn't require the plant to stay alive, so it starts to it just defoliates the leaves. It starts affecting the bottom leaves, it moves its way up, it decreases photosynthesis, it causes so many upstream problems with the infection. It causes secondary rots. It does a lot of damage. And so if we can understand it, understand, how to deal with it, then we'll be better off altogether as a community of cultivators, because it takes, you need to be pre-treating, you need to be treating not just your your canopies, but you need to be treating your soil. So you should be treating your compost or the inputs that could have potentially been contaminated. You should be sterilizing and your tools, right? Because vertical transmission. And then the biggest thing is that these Canada, that these spores that they form, they move so well in water. And so every time it rains, bam, it just flares up. Every time that it's really wet outside, it flares up. And so doing things like overhead irrigation is not ideal if we're trying to mitigate it. So doing like drip irrigation is much more efficient way to control the water. Because again, dude, there's so many different parts to understanding the management. You have to do proper water management. Um, Obviously, if you're outdoor and you can't control the weather, there's nothing you can do about that. But if it rains, for instance, that these Canada move in water and in rain. So after it rains, go and apply some beneficial microbes, some vermicompost tea, or vermicompost extract, or some EM, or some trichoderma and bacillus. You put something
It's
down.
clearly about understanding the vectors in which this travels. If you can't identify those vectors, you're blind.
Yeah, and I think
Exactly.
what Brandon's also highlighting is like you got to make a system and let that tr system work for itself. A lot of people that I find that are growing organically are also using an IPM management that's killing the things that they're putting in their system faster than they can put it back in. And try like you called out, Brandon, like putting trichodermin in throughout the life cycle is very smart because it's going to help balance, and the bacillus, it's going to help balance that throughout the life cycle of the plant. We use a ton of trichoderma throughout the whole life cycle.
Yeah.
It's part of our whole regimen at this point. So,
And what's interesting too is the science that came from CanMed, Dr. Punji, and they were talking about the endophytic colonization of Trichoderma and Beauveria bassiana, where these microbes are not just protecting, the phyllosphere, they're not just protecting the rhizosphere or living as free living soil microorganisms, but they're actually colonizing the xylem, and they're able to acquire solutes from, water that's being moved to the xylem, and they're procreating and living and colonizing these these plant xylem, which the next I can't wait to see the science that comes after this, is what's happening with these metabolites that they're producing internally, and how is it affecting things like the salicylic acid and jasmonic pathways, and how is it upregulating acquired systemic resistance, and how are these things producing signaling molecules that helps identify potential invading pathogens that are going to have a negative impact on the system as a whole. And but it's like I've been talking about like the biocrop steering stuff, the trike, the Bavaria, the bacillus, and now we're seeing confirmation that these things are actually colonizing the internal parts and the vascular transport systems of the plant. And I know from a biology standpoint what that means, even though the science hasn't shown it yet.
Fuck yeah. That's awesome, dude. There's so much more for us to learn. It's unbelievable. I always wonder, like when you were describing that pathogen, it was like, damn, this thing is like the fucking DEA of the pathogen world.
It's everywhere.
Jesus Christ, just a
Well, and
destroyer.
that's the thing that I was going to point out. Like, really depends upon your situation. Like, if you're in a flat agricultural 17 acres, like what you were just, I'm imagining you were describing earlier, Marcus. To get 17 acres, it's going to be flat. It's not going to have a ton of trees around. Versus me on my small acreage, where there's a ton of trees around, and I have just a couple little sunny plots here and there that I can do my veggies or my wheat or whatever I do. We're really talking about health of the whole property, health of the oak tree that sits right next to my garden. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's kind of when my eyes got really big, is realizing like how big this goes, and like this is the natural process. This is the kingdom coming in and saying, you're fucking it up. We got to destroy this so you can start over again.
Right.
Um, to a degree. And so it just kind of gets my charge going more and more. Like I've been fortunate where I moved, I can collect wood chips like no other. In Washington, I couldn't get them. I would work so hard, but here I had the guys bringing in like 40 to 60 yards a day. I shit you not. I was putting an hour to 2 hours a day on my little mini tractor, just pushing this shit around. I have hundreds and hundreds and probably close to 1,000 yards here that I'm like, I'll take it. You guys coming? I'll take it, and I'll put it later, on this property, and I'm gonna just mulch my whole property
What kind of
essentially.
wood chip is it?
It's all mixed, and I
It's all
don't.
mixed, huh?
Yeah, everyone always asks that, and I'm like, I don't care as long as there aren't a few of the ones that are growth inhibitors like
Yeah.
laurel or things like that, which we don't really have here. A little bit of cedar has come in, and as long as it's not too much, I'm okay with. It
Hmm.
is antimicrobial, but when I'm talking about one or two cedar trees, all year coming in, most
Yeah.
of it's oak and maple and like this really nice stuff, and it's the power company, so they're just cutting the treetops, which has the most nutrients in them, and all the leaves, and so it's like perfect, dude. I'll just let it compost there for the next year. Next spring I'll start moving it around, you know what I mean, once it's got a good 8 months,
Beautiful.
9 months. And
I
anyways.
I'm only more concerned with what kind of wood chip it is when it's for mushrooms. And so I'm very
mm,
fond of the cyanescens, the wavy caps, and those just
yeah,
love alder.
got you.
They love alder. It's quite something. But
I
yeah, it
did
seems.
buy some morel
Oh,
powder, just to put on like around the trees that I've been putting on. Like, I don't know, we'll see.
yeah.
So I bought some of the spores, not powder, but the spores in
They
powder
they
form. And
grow wild behind my house.
oh, cool.
It's awesome. Yeah, we've got
Yeah,
so many amazing mushrooms behind my house. I've shown this one before. This is a reishi that I
nice,
picked a couple years ago behind my house.
bro.
Just
I
a
miss the
fucking
Northwest.
baller.
The mushrooms in the Northwest where you live, and I used to live, it's some of the best mushrooms I've ever seen.
Well, 'tis the season right now. The mushrooms are
Yeah.
popping. I picked some pig ears the other day, which were absolutely delicious. We crushed those. We were picking chanterelles and winters, lobsters, oysters, cauliflower. I mean, shit, I can't even remember. There's so many edible mushrooms. But next time I go out, for sure will be for the psychedelic ones. It's so important to have an understanding of all of these vectors, but also on the flip side to grow genetics that will give you a leg up in resistance or fighting these things rather than at least creating genetics that are magnets for them. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Where you're like, you not only does it have no resistance, it's actually like a magnet that is pulling this stuff in.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
that's where Brian from Best Friend Farms is really doing a lot of work. I know him and I really connected really closely on that because we're in the Northeast where there's, because the hemp world out here was really not very educated on how to plant things well. The culture is just a bit different. They allowed for these, sometimes in September, October, we'll get 21 inches of rain, and that water just sits, and sits in the root zones and creates those fungal pathogens. And year after year, season after season, it just gets worse and worse. So, we've noticed we've had to select away from that and really pay attention to these types of diseases and really just work really hard in terms of just actual natural selection. So I hope others, start to do this with actually selecting towards things that are resistant rather than, like Marcus said, just growing it in a tent and being like, oh, I just got 6% or 5% off this. This is a banger. I'm going to continue to grow it and pass it around to everyone without actually testing it in an environmental stress scenario.
Well, you're
You
going to
know,
breed differently when you're breeding for field versus a tent.
correct. Yeah.
Like it just can't be the same. I was speaking with Jimmy from the original Breeders League not too long ago, and he was sending me pictures of his
Ah,
55,000 seed selection
yeah.
field, and he's got Mojave and Rob helping out over there, a whole crew of people. So I told him, I said, man, I want to get you on here. A lot of the work they're doing is looking for resistance to
It's awesome.
molds and stuff. And so it might seem even at this point in time like it's a low-hanging fruit, but if we're going to grow like quality flower on large in a field instead of in a small tent, I think that all of these things have to be understood from what Brandon is teaching about and understanding your vectors, but
Yeah.
also from the breeding standpoint, like why Chimera is always kind of like it's important that we do this right, and if we
Yep.
don't, we're gonna create a bunch of weakness in the plant instead of strength. And I've always thought that there's a lot to be said for that, that it's, yes, you can get away with growing almost anything. Like shit, we find bag seed, and like you said, oh, this bag seed's like one of the best cultivars I've ever grown. But then if you take that bag seed and, throw it into a 10-acre field, it might show you some different things.
Totally.
Like in fruit trees, that's really common to graft, right?
Yeah.
We're all pretty common with
Air
that, that
layers.
term. Yeah, and they use a rootstock, and that's more resistant, and then they
Yeah.
put the thing that they want on top, and they kind of get the best of both worlds, and they do it
Sometimes
with
require
tomatoes and peppers, and it's not as commonly
and
known.
grapes is a huge one because
Yeah,
the you've
grapes
Oh
is a
yeah.
huge one,
actually have been pathogens that have completely wiped out
right?
specific cultivars. And the only
Yeah.
way to save those was to graft them onto a different rootstock. And the thing, like this happens all the time in the plant world. The reason why banana flavored candy tastes like bananas, but that's not the way bananas taste like, is because those bananas that used to taste like that are extinct. They got hit with a fungal blight and it completely wiped out that species. And now we're growing a hybridized species. And it's like we have to be aware of these things. So like if we're not doing the work to select on a genetic level, that like we could potentially
Well,
end up in the yeah.
that was kind of my point, is like, we generally, myself included, we think I'm going to breed for the whole package. I'm going to breed for this plant that looks good both indoor and outdoor, that dumps hash, that also does good in flower, that is bomb proof out, instead of, like, I think we, because of that notion in our heads, and then generally speaking, we overlook things that we might just go, what, this one's bomb proof. What if we try, grafting, and try a whole grafting routine? They do. It's common to graft tomatoes onto eggplants, and they sell them as clones and put them in the mail and ship them out, and people put them in their gardens. Like, we can do this. It's not
Yeah.
that hard.
It's definitely a cool concept, air layering. I remember the first time I read about it in marijuana botany, and I was just like, I gotta try this. And I got a little bit of rock wool, and I was cutting stems and wrapping them in plastic and then injecting them to keep them moist and fed. And
They
holy
make these little
shit,
clips, dude. You do it as
dude.
a seedling,
Wow, this
and
was like 30 years
I
ago
know,
or
I know, I
whatever.
know, but I'm just saying that they make these little. They look like little paper
I
clips, and
know, I
yeah,
know.
it's so cool.
They're so perfect, dude. Man, we've come a long way. Honestly, that is like the equivalent of like when they created the PF Tech method for spore inoculation. That was major when they put the
Right,
spores into the syringes
in the
compared to
syringe.
like creating an agar medium, growing, inoculating it with mycelium, transfer chambers, all this bullshit just went into, we're done.
Yep.
I love
Well,
that.
I think Brandon brought up a really good point. The 1800s, like Fixolera, it almost wiped out the whole wine industry. And that's, when I, like yourself, Brandon, I reached out to Kevin when I had a weird plant that showed, let's call it a camouflage look to it, call it 5 years ago. And he's like, I've never seen that before in my life. And so we started doing tests and we found out that it was hop laden viride. And then we started doing more tests and testing the root zone, the water, I mean, the soil, I mean, everything you could think of. Um, I think it's awesome that you're doing this work because it's beneficial not only for your own head, but the world around us really needs to understand this because we just don't know, and that's the reality of it. Um, and
When you
it's
get into
amazing.
plant science, there are still so many unknowns. And
Yeah.
I teamed up with Cove Environmental, which is, they've been into environmental testing for a few decades, and they are, they're all friends of mine, and they're all smokers, and they're not like directly involved in the cannabis world other than themselves as users. And we teamed up with you, the professor of biology, and we're doing a bunch of ionomics projects. So what we're going to be doing is a bunch of peer-reviewed, just pure science research where we're looking at the correlations of the actual ionomic makeup of an organism and how it affects other organisms. Like a good example, it would be we could look at how something like copper levels or iron levels affect the ability for a pathogen to infect another organism, right? Or we could look at how higher calcium levels can prevent, pathogens from attacking. Or we could, see how a certain type of nutrient might upregulate a genetic response in plants. So we can look at all of basically an infinite amount of different type of data that we can use using ionomics. And so it's super awesome. We just did a continuation of that project with medicinal genomics where we took leaf tissue samples of infected and the non-infected, and they were actually able to look at that material from an ion perspective. And then we were able to figure out things like the infected plants had higher levels of chromium and palladium, which are two different heavy metals. And so, we could hypothesize, that higher heavy metals, or that they're using heavy metals for electron transport, and that's one of the ways that they're becoming more effective. So there's different things you can look at using basically a readout of all of the total ions, not just available nutrients or nutrients that are supposed to be there, but things that aren't supposed to be there as well.
Got it. So, what's fascinating is, I think I did a small trial this summer with different nutrients. I did my living soil thing, and then I tried stuff from different people that had organic lines, and I did it in pots. It was like 3 different pots. I did it in 3 different lines. Same plants, same clones. And one line became totally infected with blight and all you could just name them all. It was just all of it. Next line, no, not so much, and the other one didn't really have it. And I had this thought. I thought because the particular line that was, experiencing and all these flare-ups had really high levels of every constituent, in its call it the repertoire, the formulation that they had, right?
Yeah.
And I started
So
thinking
high.
about it, and I was like, I just thought to myself, I was like, man, there must be a stress response happening from this feeding that is allowing it to do this, because these are the same clones, same soil, just literally a different regimen based on, what I'm being told to feed it, right? So I'd love to see the data as you go down that road to talk more pointed about it. It seems like there are stress response, right, that's happening, and it may be different cultivar to cultivar, right? But I'd love to see the rhythm that creates, or the pattern that creates, if you will, through the data, to see how that kind of comes out. Because I think you're onto something there. It's really apparent.
Well,
It
I
really
mean,
is.
as an agronomist, and I'm somebody who is constantly looking at and then correlating that to plant health. My biggest thing is always, proper nutrient balance, because proper nutrient balance is usually going to create the best possible genetic expression for that plant.
Sure.
And we know from science level, that things like over-fertilization of nitrogen can cause a lot of issues with plant pathogens and higher insect pressure, right? Because they're looking to get that nitrogen, because nitrogen is a key component of, things like RNA and DNA. It's needed for proteins, and every living organism needs it. So it's like they have more access to that. If you're over fertilizing, it could cause those potential problems. It's like we already know that nutrients affect how plants respond to different types of pressures, biotic and abiotic stresses. So what we're really trying to do is find like a complete picture of like what these balances look like and like the interactions, not just between like nutrients, but the interactions between other elements that are in the environment that will affect essentially the health and productivity, not just of the plants, but the things that they're associated with, right? Because when we start talking about like ionomics and we're talking about, okay, well, there's an organism that's colonizing an organism that is essentially causing an upregulated effect, we have to look at how the nutrients are interacting between both of those organisms and how they're interacting holistically together.
Sure. No, that's a really good point, Brendan. Man, I wish I could stay longer, guys, but this is one of those conversations I'm gonna break my heart to miss. But it's great work, man. It's really awesome to hear from you, and um, can't wait to see the results of what you're doing as it's ongoing. Kevin's team's awesome. I love I've been to the lab so many times. It's amazing what they've got over there, and the way that they can test the root zone and understand the microbiome now is like pretty amazing. And I think that's where stuff like this really it's cool that you're utilizing what he's built over there for it, because it's incredible, man. So kudos to you, man.
Enjoy the
Yeah.
game, Colin.
Yeah, peace everybody. Much love, Dutch. ATN,
Peace,
please get
bro.
well, man. I'm so sorry you're going through it, man. I'm sorry we didn't get to address. And
Um,
Brian, good to see you, brother. Much love.
I'm I'm going
Caleb.
home today. I just got the discharge. Got to wait for my pharmacy stuff to clear.
Right.
So home today.
That's what's
Sick.
up,
All
brother.
right, Marcus. Much love, bro. And happy anniversary to you and your wife, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The big
I'll talk to you
3-0.
soon, bro.
Yes,
Peace, man.
absolutely.
See you guys.
Welcome,
So,
Ryan.
welcome, Ryan. I have a question along this topic. I don't know if you've been following along. We're talking about septoria slash what Brandon has identified the actual name of. What did you call it, Brandon?
Alternaria.
Alternaria. And we started talking about, of course, breeding resistance. And as you know, I'm from Washington, West Coast, right by the water, and I've been breeding outdoors for mold and mildew resistance, generally speaking, right? Just kind of an overarching term for 6, 7 years, and I think that most of my gear is that, right? At least that was my experience there. In the last 2 years ago, 16 months ago, I relocated to Michigan or to Minnesota and got hit with this leaf spot thing. And it's none of the plants that were successful in the Northwest were resistant to this leaf spot thing by any means. And in fact, I have over 80 cultivars, right? Like moms that showed pretty much zero resistance. I might say I'd have two of each. I might see that one didn't have it 10 feet over here, but one might have it right here. And so I don't know. We're just talking about breeding and resistance, and I'm just kind of throwing that framework out there to kind of hear your thoughts. Always look forward to hearing what you think on these things.
Yeah, I was on a call, so I actually missed a lot of what was already being said, but Marcus sent me a message and said you guys were talking about it. There, it's an interesting kind of setup. Like the way that you've been doing it is kind of like the same way that we hear a lot of people talk about cannabis. It's like, oh, I've got this powdery resistant line. And we're at the point in time now with genomics where we're starting to understand that like for example, powdery mildew, like there's a gene in the cannabis plant that when the gene is working, it kind of acts like an entry door or like a docking mechanism for powdery mildew to get into the plant, right? And so if you have a broken copy of that gene, it's actually way more difficult for the powdery mildew to attach, to even attach and kind of get its historia, like, the part that actually penetrates the plant and sucks out the juice and the energy. It's not able to dock to the plant. Okay. So what we've been doing for the last 30 years is selecting plants that seem to be resistant. But what we're not doing is taking very specific organism, like, the way they do this in in real breeding labs and university labs is they'll go and they'll get an isolate of a very specific mold, like you're saying Alternaria or whatever. It could be botrytis, it could be like a specific strain of powdery mildew, and they actually inoculate the plants. And that's how you can actually test phenotypically if the plant is resistant or not, right? But what we're getting to now with cannabis, well, with a lot of plants, but cannabis has now been included in the group of cool kid plants. Whereas, like, we've sequenced the plant and we're starting to learn that there's specific genes or gene variants that may provide resistance to either alternaria or any other number of fungal pathogens, right? I was over in Holland, like we talked about it, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever. I was over, in Holland, kind of helping Diana with David's estate, and I went down to this research lab in the south of Holland, and they're working with these universities, and they took me to the university setup, and they have like a whole fridge with like literally 100 different fungal pathogen strains, all like isolated cultures in petri dishes. And so you can say, hey, we need a sample of this, and they'll grow it up, and you take it and you put it in a spray bottle, and now you actually have like the actual pest that you can create like a dosing curve and then start actually dosing plants. Whereas the way we've been doing it before, Dutch, it's like, you put the plants out and you say, you're like, you think that you're getting exposed to the disease, but you may or you may not, right? It's like really hit or miss. So you're not even in the environment where you know that you're like, you're testing the plant within that given stressor, right? So we're
Right. It could be like the response that I'm seeing could be from a plethora of things. It could be nutrient, microbial.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's like that's the way that you really have to do this type of breeding is be using all of the right tools, and the right tools include having the pathogens, in that you can create like dose response curves. But, this new world of genomics now really opens up the door, right? And what we've seen, at least in powdery mildew, and it's probably going to be the same thing in with these other molds, when you're not actively selecting for these traits, they get lost because we're so focused on flavor or THC or plant structure or, shape of the flowers or color or scent profiles or whatever. We're focusing on all these other things. And the way that it works with genomics or breeding is like you select for the things that you want. And inevitably, those genes that you're selecting for, they have neighboring genes, and you get the neighboring genes that come along with the house. It's like if you're buying a house, like imagine you're buying a house on the internet and you see all the pictures, and there's a beautiful, awesome house, and you're like, okay, damn, I'm buying this fucking house, and you set it up and you pay your check or whatever, and you go down to see your house and you show up and there's a crack house next door. Right? It's like it's exactly the same way with like genomics, right? It's like you're so selecting for a specific gene for flavor, you don't realize that the gene next door that's responsible for powdery mildew resistance is a crack house, right? It
Right.
just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And so we've been doing this for 30 years now or 40 years now, right? And so we're kind of blind to the genes that we're not selecting for. And because of that, we've selected or we haven't selected for genes that are actually resistant to all these things. And so now we live in this world with genomics where it's like we can start understanding through science and other species, like, you can go online and type alternaria resistance in plants, and we might come across like a set of research studies that they've done in tomato or corn or who knows what other plant, and you find that oh, hey, we've isolated this gene variant that leads to resistance against alternaria, and now we can take that information and kind of copy it, paste it into the cannabis genome browser, and start looking for that gene variant families. Because what happens in genomics is like you can kind of think of a plant genome as like a set of instructions, right? And there's these core genes that are shared between all plants, right? Because they all came from the same common ancestor at one point in time. So inevitably, what ends up happening is for a lot of these like resistance genes, these gene families exists in many different species. And so what you learn in one species, be it corn or tomato or whatever, wheat, you can actually apply that research and then go back and do these targeted screens,
Cool.
right?
Basically, just look at the data set, right? You're just like, okay, we know that this data on these other species is true, so we could look at the data set in cannabis and just work from there. Is
Yeah,
that what you're?
and this is where land races are really valuable, right? Because land races are essentially these genetic repositories of genetic variation that, yeah, like I don't necessarily think that they're the best plants in the world. Like you're not going to be winning cannabis cups really with landrace plants, but they provide what I call genetic repair pools, right? Where it's like so it's a genetic resource where you can go back and hunt for these specific traits. And once you find those specific traits related to resistance, now we can start doing things like you could CRISPR those changes into cannabis plants, but that's expensive and technically difficult. You can also just start using backcross programs or whatever, various genetic introgression programs to move those genetic traits into our modern, truly improved cannabis drug lines, right?
The other
Uh,
thing we were talking about before you popped on was like the idea of grafting, and so maybe something like what you're talking about, using a more landrace resistant cultivar to as the rootstock to graft onto all of our flavors, because it is something that's unique about cannabis that we can't throw away. It's very unique and valuable, and we're not going to throw that away, but we need to find tools to make these things work.
yeah, well, so someone was Colin was mentioning phylloxera and how that kind of wiped out the wine industry. What happened there is they like when they went to the New World, they used to find new plants and they dig them up, and you'd wrap the root ball in like a fucking sack of burlap, and it would go back on the ship and be sailed back over to Europe, and they'd plant that chunk of root soil into a vineyard. Well, what happened is they had aphids. Like phylloxera is an aphid, right? So these root aphids, they grow out of the soil and they contaminate the entire vineyard. And now they're starting to wipe out like huge areas of vineyards. And so what they did is they realized that the North American vines were resistant to phylloxera, and they started grafting these resistant vines onto modern cultivars. So the cultivar would be the top of the plant, but the rootstock is this wild resistant relative that's been growing in a forest somewhere for, hundreds or thousands of years. And it's one of the ways around it. But the problem with that is that like genetically, you don't really get compounds that are produced in the roots that move up to the top of the plant. And so that resistance worked for like because the rootstock was
It was a
resistant.
root, yeah, because it was a root
Like,
issue.
does the genetic signal actually move into the rest of the plant? Which I think most often it doesn't, right? So um, it's not, it's kind of a patch, but I don't think that that's actually really going to get us where we need to go. I did all this research on beta caryophyllene years ago, and I found this paper on um, in corn. And in corn, like we were talking about earlier, when you so select for one trait, you kind of end up being blind to the traits that are not under selection. And in this pursuit that they had in North America over the last, 50 years to develop sweet corn, like high sugar corns for the production of corn syrup, essentially is what they were doing. They wanted to produce lots of high fructose corn starch or corn sugar. Uh, um, is that they bred these plants that had all the genes related to sugar production. But inevitably, what happened is they co-selected a trait or a plant, or sorry, a genetic type that was beta caryophyllene um, free in the roots. And so you can think of beta caryophyllene as like this kind of bitter compound. And so, you get aphids or pests that are like chewing on the roots. If it's bitter, they're going to go find something else to eat. But these plants that didn't have this bitter compound, this beta caryophyllene in their roots, they became really palatable to the aphids, right? So it's one of these things that we do is that as we improve down a certain direction of plant of trades, we realize again that there's like all these crack house neighboring genes that we co-select inadvertently, and now we have to go back and build that resistance back into the plant, right? So um yeah, it's it's cool because now we have all these tools. Like before, we were just kind of like crossing blindly and hoping that it worked out, right? But like it's one of the cool things of where we are now that we're getting to the point where we have these genetic tools and these labs that have all these isolates, where it's like we can start doing these studies.
Kind of lifts the veil. I was saying that to Brandon earlier as he was talking about all the different sort of vectors that these pathogens can follow. And I was like, well, if you can't know those vectors, you're blind. You need to understand what those vectors are to be able to see where they're coming from. And
100%.
it's kind of the same thing. I do love how this conversation's going because you got Brandon on one side with the you know, the aspect of care for the garden, understanding vectors, mycorrhizosphere, all of these different things. And then the aspect that you bring to the table, which is like proper breeding, like let's breed this properly. I've said it for a million times over. Prohibition really got us to a position. I don't think there was a ton of breeding going on during the beginning of prohibition, but there was selecting going on. And the selecting was how much can I get and how fast can I get it? And that definitely, that pathway led us to a very specific range of what we could get out of cannabis. And now I love the term, the repair center that you're talking about in regards to some of these genetic repair systems on these landrace cultivars, because I've never looked at a land race and been like, oh God, yeah. Like I think a lot of people kind of miss the bus when they realize like land races aren't going to be super enjoyable to puff.
Romanticize them,
But
right?
what's in there? There's a pot of gold in there potentially, the leprechaun's pot of gold if you can find it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even finding like one plant, right? Like you're not it's not like you that's what we do is we grow these landrace populations and you look for a plant and it's like, oh, this is the winner, right? But it's like the winner, the true prize in the landrace germplasm is one gene, right? You're not finding a winner plant. It's like you're going in and harvesting this one gene that provides the resistance and moving that gene in through crosses. That's the real win, right? So they do have like a really important role. It's just I think the community like really romanticizes, oh, I've got the Pakistani whatever, right? Or the Afghan, like, Khyber Pass, whatever. And inevitably, too, what happens is people are like, oh, I got 10 seeds from a dude that sent me from Pakistan. And it's just like, that's not enough to find the gene, right? It's not good enough to just grow like 10 plants. We've gotten in this habit where it's like you think, oh, you grow 10 plants and that gives you like the entire genetic picture of a population. That's not the way it works, right? Like you have to be growing like 50, 100, even like 500 or more plants before you're finding even those specific genes. And unless you're doing this expensive genome sequencing, you're totally blind. Like it's literally luck of the draw, right? So,
Marker assisted breeding can definitely help if you can find those specific characteristics and it's in a plant, and then you can test the progeny to also see if that same marker is available. I think that's one of the ways that we can expedite the breeding process for resistance as well. But I agree with you on the landrace stuff. I've never grown a landrace that I was like, hell yeah, I'm stoked on this. It's always been like, fuck, dude, if I want to do anything with this, it's going to take serious line work to get it to a place where it's like a viable cultivar that I can like grow and produce and be happy with.
well, it's like going back in genetic time, right? And it's we do it with like with corn, with cannabis, we're call it 30 years or 40 years of seriously being down this line of this process. But in corn, they've been doing this for over 100 years, right? Like 125 years. And with that kind of genetic progress, if you're going to start a new line, you don't go back to the beginning and start again, right? Because we really have made a lot of progress. And as much as I kind of shit talked a lot of the breeding that's been done over the last like 30, 40 years, we have made incredible gains. Like we've made huge plants that smell really great. They produce a ton of cannabinoids compared to what they were producing 30 years ago. And the plants are just better. But it's like you have to understand too, when you cross that back to a land race, like, even like some Santa Marta or like an old Mexican, like from the 70s, you're undoing a lot of that genetic progress that cannabis breeders have done over the last 30 years. So there's always an opportunity cost when you're breeding, right? It's like you go back to
Got
something up, but it's like there's a cost in doing that. So,
I've
and I
got
think
some
that's a
from
it's a good thing for like the cannabis community to understand too, is because like I said, we romanticize these old school varieties, and it's like somebody will say, "Oh, I've got this Skittles crossed with like an old Mexican from the '70s." It's like, yeah, that's awesome. That's not the end of the project. In fact, it's the fucking beginning, right? It's like it's cool, but like let's not oversell what we got, right? Like it's like it's okay to recognize that you're at the beginning of the path, not the fucking top of the mountain. So,
yeah. I've got this big ass Pakistani plant. It came from seeds from Kevin Jodrey, and I tell you what, it got massive. It was probably like 16 or 17 feet tall, huge, tons of weed on it. But it is just like it just reminds me of like old. It reminds me of like
Hey,
grandpa or something. You know what I mean? Where it's
I'll
like the terp, it doesn't have really good terps. It's all right. It's kind of more like incensey or peppery, nothing like super special and loud. Got a little fruit in it.
Yeah, I remember when Breeder Steve in Lugano planted some seeds from Dave from the Skunk Man, and it was like I can't remember what he gave him, like Durban poison and some other things, but I'll never forget Steve. He just had these greenhouse, these rows of beautiful, like his, all his plants that were all very much the same, and then he had this crazy like 12-foot plant that was like leaning over and it was just had these giant colas on it. I have photos of it. I remember my daughter was only less than a year old when I was there the first time, and so she's in the pictures with this plant, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool, man." Like he's like, "I'll never fucking grow this again. It's hay. It's absolutely the worst thing." I was just like, "Oh shit." Like, yeah, I guess it doesn't really look that good. But that's the blind breeder, right? Because the breeder with vision would be like, there's something in here. Well, Dave had those seeds for a reason, let's just say.
yeah, well, they're lottery tickets.
That's it.
They're lottery tickets, and there can be a winner, and it's like if you don't know what the winning number is,
Well, you're
you
not going to get a winner off of one,
yeah, but like I said, sometimes the winner is one gene in the shitty plant.
right?
Right? If you throw away the shitty plant, you throw away that gene. And
Right.
if
So
as
it's
long as you're not if you're not doing genomics, I remember Steve saying at one point in time back then, we're solving cannabis cancer. I was like, no, you're not, dude. Like, but because it's just you didn't have the tools back then. We didn't have the tools. He doesn't have the skills anyway. But that back then, we didn't even have the tools to be doing this kind of work, right? And we do now. Um, so we got some labs here in Canada at universities, and they're actually doing this. They've got like 1,000 plant grow licenses and greenhouses and full-on genomic suites and genetic maps of the plant, and you grow 1,000 plants, and it costs you $5 a sample, but for $5,000, $5 times 1,000, within 4 weeks of sprouting the seeds, you've got full genome sequencing of every plant, right? And now you've got a population where you can take these like computer genomics tools and go in and start looking at specific genes and screening for things,
Mhm.
looking to see if we have these resistances hidden in some of these genomic or these plants.
Well, that was the
Like I said,
dream, talking to Dave back in the day about those 100,000 haze crossed with haze seeds and the idea of planting them on 20 acres in Jamaica and growing them up huge, and ideally having that genomic work at a place where you could preserve what you planted in the field rather than lose 95% of it. One of the ideas we had was because he said, look, I want to plant 100,000 seeds and then I'll just go in and pick like 5 or 6 of them and I'll do the breeding work with those. And I was like, well, what about all the other ones? He said, well, yeah, what about them? I said, I don't know, man. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you had like a golden ticket and you could, sell those golden tickets to breeders who are looking for breeding stock, and they could come in and they wouldn't touch the plants that you had picked, but they could pick any of the other 900 or 99,988 or 83 plants that were left. And that was just kind of the dream, being able to have computers to a point where they could aggregate data and they could do this work so quickly. I mean, even what you just said, in 4 weeks to be able to do that to 5,000 plants is absolutely incredible. It's only going to get faster.
Well, bro, and that's where you're giving you Johnny B here for this conversation, but that's where the future comes in with AI, right? It's like you start letting go these these language models and these AI systems to the data because they can just sort the data so much more faster than humans can, right? And it's like that's the next level of it's the next level of um of development for the species. But it's like there's these investment companies that are like, they're investing in like AI and genomics together. It's like genomics, whether it's in like human health or animal health or plant, breeding, that's going to bring us to the next level. Because when we started out doing the sequencing thing, it was really expensive, and it was like you end up with the sequence of one plant. That doesn't do you any good when you're looking at a population of plants, right? Right. But it's like now that we got the cost down and the throughput so high up, it's like we can start actually doing that for relatively low cost. I mean, sure, $5,000, it's it's an investment, right? If you're a breeder, but it's an investment that can really yield some returns. um, and you can start really moving things forward. And especially when you tie in like machine learning into the data sets, it's like we're on the cusp here of really being able to change plants.
It's really going to take like bigger data pools, like data sets, right? To do more, because like I still hold like our ability to discern quality above a computer, because a computer can only discern so much, right? It's limited to what we're looking for, right? Which is a huge tool because it can look across. We're talking about looking for a very specific thing versus like just looking and finding the next super boof or whatever. Like, just to throw that other part of the conversation in there. Like, this is not me disagreeing with anything you're saying, Ryan. I'm just kind of, this is something that that cannabis just keeps like those winners, right? Those ones that just keep coming out. You never hear of it coming from a big farm ever. It's always from somebody's tent, for the most part, right? And it's just an interesting.
That's why when it comes to like that Hayes discussion with David and 100,000 plants, it's like David had this real idealist spirit part to him. Like it was part of his personality, and he'd like it's one of these things that allowed him to swing for the fences and do these really esoteric things. But it's like truthfully, nobody can select the best plant out of 100,000 plants. You can't do it, right? If
Right.
it's just you and your nose, like that's a fucking monumental task. We grew fucking
Dude, it's insane. You got to be a savant.
well, and we grew.
Even 1,800 is like 500 it's fucking hard.
Listen, we grew 16 of those haze plants recently in Holland at this research facility where they have all the different bacterial isolates. Okay, and he's got a big old greenhouse, and it's pretty high tech, but it's like, and we grew. So I gave him the seeds, and he grew 16 haze plants from seed. The 8 males that popped up, I mean, dude, they took up a whole bay, right? So it's like, yeah, here they are. Here, it's like to actually see. I can't imagine how much space it would have taken to grow 100,000 plants. Like it would have been insane, and it would have been Dave and Marcus's dream to be walking through these plants and selecting them for hash. But imagine, like, go back one, Marcus, on that one if you don't mind, that where you see the big plants. Like, imagine 100,000 of these things,
Right, right.
right? Like it's like this plant is huge, right? Like these are massive tables. Um, so yeah, this is an Exo BV. Check them out. They're a contract research organization in the south of Holland,
Go
and
crazy.
they can't sell any of the flower because of the way they're licensed and set up. They have the same type of opium verlof that David worked under. But what they can do is rent out a chunk of space to a nutrient company, and then they can run trials for the nutrient company on all these different cultivars that they have. And that way, the nutrient companies can actually start tweaking their recipes based on real cannabis data. But yeah, you see these hazy things. I mean, and this is like 8 plants or 8 females or whatever. Imagine trying to do 100,000. I mean, it's crazy. So Yeah, they're doing these. He's trying to figure out how to do this vertical farming. It's kind of like a vertical scrog with like a very low like energy light input, but they're getting great results. It's kind of a, I think it's something that home growers should start looking at if they want to grow these big equatorial plants. Is start hanging your lights sideways like this and put them on the walls and create like it's kind of like those back in the 80s, those Phototron devices where you had the fluorescence kind of shining in from the lights on the sides. But they're getting some pretty decent yields and very low
Oh,
elevation.
Phototron.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool project for sure. And I don't know why, but I will always have a profound respect for people who grow haze. It's just I was lucky enough to grow one very, very early on. We called it Hugo. It was only a 16 to 17 week haze. So, what I thought back then was pure. I was like 16, 17 weeks, like 18 if you push it. It was so long of a flowering, but years later I would hit 24s and 25s. Some had a 26 week flower in Spain one year that we tried, and it was definitely just super different, exotic, if you will.
Yeah, David used to have what he called the Christmas haze and the New Year's haze, right? Like, they were done in the new year because they're indeterminate flowering, so they just keep popping out flowers.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
hard to cut it down when it's doing that, but yeah, I've also just always loved the profile, the volatile organic profile of most of the haze type varieties. I've just always had an appreciation for that perfume, if you will, frankincense almost, just this really just rank.
well, that's the interesting thing that we're getting now. Now that he's harvesting, we're going to send all these plants off to the lab. They have one of Ruben's NIR device that he uses for
Dude,
cannabinoids,
I talked to him
but we're
about
going to
that. He
send it.
loves it.
Yeah, he does love it. He thinks it's amazing.
Yeah, he's more stoked. He told me, I couldn't believe
He
this. He
told
said, I
me.
have a full lab and I prefer this thing over my lab. And I was kind of like, why? And he's like, well, it's for the data resolution. I can test every 30 seconds to a minute with this thing. And my lab, well, they have to like pack columns and prepare and do this whole process and clean. And it takes like, I can't remember what he said, but I think he said it was like over a half an hour plus to do a test. I was like, oh yeah, that's a
Oh,
lot less
oh
testing.
yeah. I mean, you're extracting.
An
It's a whole
hour?
process. Like if you're going to run 100 samples, it takes you a day of prep to just extract all the samples, and then the next day you're running them through the lab, unless you have like a high throughput setup. But yeah,
Mm.
it's a lot of work to get even just 100 sample data points. Whereas, he could run that in a day. As you know, Marcus, we were doing some tests at your house the other day with those machines.
Yeah.
It really opens it. He was the one that convinced me actually that because I've always been those NIR devices have not been the greatest.
No, no, they haven't at
Photon
all.
and all that
They
other stuff.
had to meet Ruben. Ruben, he programmed it. He created all the data. He worked at the University of Barcelona with the agriculture, and he did one in Amsterdam. He did these big, large projects. I think he even did one for BioBiz. It's very good for nutrients because you can test the macro and micronutrients of the plant, its uptake, and if you're doing that often, the data resolution that you're going to get is going to be a lot clearer than it's always the same thing, right? It's always about getting eyes on what you're doing. Are we working blind or can we see what we're doing? And it seems like, when we all started in this, everyone was blind. And what an unbelievable eye-opening cannabis has been for all of us over the course of the last 30 plus years. Holy shit.
And we had this thing at NAPRO we used to say where it's like if you don't measure it, you can't manage it, right? Like if you're not actively quantifying the thing that you're looking at, how do you really progress towards either turning up a compound or turning it down, right? Like the nose is good because
Hmm.
it's the nose is crucial. It's like Dutch you were saying, man. Like the nose is crucial. It's like the machines will never replace the human experience because that's what we're doing is we're judging the experience with how that plant interacts with our own genome, really, our own bioassay. But the machines give us a way to break down that experience into data that you can quantify and manage. And that's where we really are on the cusp of this new world. of breeding and development of plants, and especially cannabis, because it's such an interesting plant with all this genetic variation and chemical variation that finally we're getting the technology's catching up, where we're actually now have this set of really powerful tools that we can start applying to tease apart this like chemical hairball. And yeah, I'm quite excited about the future for breeding, because it's like finally the technology has gotten to this place where we can kind of just do crazy shit.
Well, dude, for you, I would liken it to Roger Waters and The Wall when he was finally able to do the concert after 35 years old, but 35 years of the album existing because of the technology, being able to create that huge wall across the concert area, the drones putting like three-dimensional like images onto the wall, like all of the technology. He wrote that so many years prior, 40 plus years, and to be able to get to a point where, oh, now you can show it to the world through the technology. I feel very much the same way with cannabis right now. And I think that it's going to be a very exciting next 10 years. I suspect we're going to see a lot of novelty, particularly in volatile organic compounds. For the last 10 years, we've called all of the compounds terps.
Yeah.
So, just even understanding that it's not terps, but it's a whole variety of terpenes and terpenoids and esters and aldehydes and thiols and thiolates and on the list goes, that create these super unique, very much the way the human mind works. We only pay attention to the one thing, just like you were saying with the genetics. Well, don't forget about the crack house that might be moving in next door. Well, it's the same thing with flavor profiles. You've got, you can't just accord, oh, I love the GMO flavor. Those are my favorite terps. It's like, I don't think that's a terp, actually. I think it's a thiol, that garlicky, funky, oniony smell. I
But
don't
it's the
think
symphony of all the compounds together too. Right?
exactly
Like that's
the
what people
profile.
experience. Yeah, exactly, the profile. It's funny, it's like I keep going back in time to these memories I have with like David and Rob. I remember sitting with David and Rob at David's house in like 2001 or 2002, and we were talking. They were teaching me all about the terps, and that was like a really new thing back then. And because they had been doing all these bioassay experiments where they were dosing THC with individual terps and trying to figure out which one had which effect.
I remember.
And they really didn't want to share the terpene story with the world. And it wasn't because they wanted to limit the research. It's because they knew, even back then, they knew that people were going to start taking terps and dabbing them into hash and putting them into, they're going to take terps from other sources and spraying them on weed and spraying it into THC or hashes or oils. And
which
then
they did.
which is of course what happened. Yeah, they did. Like it goes to show like the genius of those dudes way back in the day. They knew exactly how it was going to play out before the information was ever let out of the bottle. Right? Like the vision of Rob and David was those dudes, like they understood the things. They understood that there was things in the plant that we hadn't figured out yet. And that's what Horror Farm was about, right? It was David trying to figure out a way to fund and get all the money together so that he could spend his life figuring those things out, right? So anyway, much love to the skunk man. You guys should do a rip. I'll have to find my bong and do one too.
Rip for the skunk band. I'd like to hear more from Brandon as well, and a little bit of he founded Bokashi Earthworks. I'd love
This
to
one up there.
love to
You
go
guys
back
can
to some of those early
that.
days.
Look at that little
You got a fat dab there, dude. What the
that dab.
fuck?
I'm not gonna take that all. I just want to show the beauty
Fuck.
there.
I was like, what the fuck, dude?
That's the Bicket, bro.
Damn
I'm
straight.
not that. Yeah, lose my shit. I'll do a
I love
decent
to
one.
see melt. Don't get me wrong. I think rosin is amazing,
Melt is where it's at,
but
bro.
melt is the five-course dinner and rosin is dessert. Doesn't make it
Yeah.
any less, I love rosin. Don't get me wrong. I think it's amazing, but that melt, bro? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
You fucking kidding me?
You still with us, Brandon? You might be gone.
That
What
looks
about?
awesome, Dutch, what you're puffing on.
No, I'm still here.
That looks like the hash that you can smoke through or you can see through, you can read through.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's the
pretty
read-through
delish.
hash. I wanted to hear a little bit about your earlier days, Brandon, and founding a Bokashi. Can you take us back to those early days? Kind of like the wildest lessons you learned from those old school growers that probably still shape your approach to cultivation today?
Well, I started when I was like maybe just had turned 19. 2002 is when I didn't get into it like I wasn't like a home grower or I wasn't like trying to grow in the closet. Like when I started, it was like these guys had multiple houses already going. They'd already been cultivating for, 11, 12 years. They were like, this is what they did for a living, was
Hmm.
just grow. And so for me, I got thrown into the mix because my father grew weed before me, but he was a gangster. He got a life sentence in 1996. And then, I didn't grow up with him. I was in foster care and stuff. But when I turned 18, I got a hold of my mom. She got me in touch with him. And then he's like, you need to go meet these dudes. So it was like his friends are the people that basically took me under their wing. And they were all involved in, the underground scene for a long, long time. So I got into it with the guys that created the Afghani bull rider down in San Diego, which is,
Oh
a San
shit.
Diego.
Yeah, the bull rider.
So there's two different distinctions. There's original bull rider, which nobody knows what those genetics are, but that was actually acquired in Lakeside at the rodeo by Rex and Mike Gerbo, and then they all were partners with Hopper, which he was the manager for the Cottonmouth Kings at the time, and they were like the first guys to like brand. Like they made T-shirts, they were like singing about it and stuff. I think they're kind of like the first people to really like brand like a strain of weed. And then in 2001, that bull rider got crossed with an Afghani to make the Afghani bull rider. But the Afghani bull rider was more prevalent. It was cultivated for a solid decade by our crew out there, and it was consistent. And so that's kind of what built the legend. A lot of people, if you weren't like really in the scene in the 90s, which the bull rider was even before my time. I didn't start smoking. I think I started smoking like 1998. And so, but 2001 was when the Afghani bull rider was created, and those dudes, you know, it got really popular. It was one of the most popular things. But I worked with those dudes. Basically, the first time I ever went to a grow house was after months of just working for these OGs, doing all their dirty work, like cutting their grass and washing their dogs. Basically, just doing a bunch of like bitch work. They just wanted to test me, but eventually, they put a blindfold on me, put me in the back of the truck, drove me up to one of the grows, and they're like, "We need you to cut open this galvanized steel conduit with this Dremel so we can steal power." And they're like, "We'll pay you $2,000 if you can do it. Don't fucking kill yourself because we're gonna have to get rid of your body." And I was like,
Jesus.
let's fucking do this. Let's go. I put on some punk rock music and spent the next, 8 hours with a Dremel cutting open this pipe. But after I got it cut open, dude, it like solidified my thing. They're like, "You're in, kid." They gave me the nickname, the Kid. Uh, and it's just I worked with those guys, managing their grows, multiple different houses with multiple different partners for about 2 years. And during that time, I was, I was getting popular in the weed scene. Like I was slanging a lot of weed. I was, picking up their weed. I was fucking picking up weed from other people that were in the circle. And then I met some guys that were slanging a lot of the weed. I was selling them. They were my biggest customer. I was selling them the most weed. And I was like, "What's up? You guys got to be making money. You guys want to start up a grow because these OGs are moving out of this spot. They're upgrading and getting another place. And so these two spots are opening up. We could get them." And then, it was just doing my own thing with my own partners from there.
That's interesting that you have that bull rider connection because my good buddy who lived up here, he doesn't anymore. He's originally from Chicago. His name's Andy, but we all called him Raz. And he worked for Mark Emery for years selling seeds. And one of Raz's sort of amazing things is he would just take any pack of seeds and he'd pop them and then he'd grow them and they would be like exceptional. every single time. Didn't matter the genetic. It could be anything from any company. He would just grow like full melt resin. And I knew that because we would often make bubble hash together. Well, he knew the guys in San Diego quite well. I just tried to text him, but he hasn't replied yet because I wanted to find out what exact names those guys had from the ones you just mentioned. But he got that bull rider and brought it up to Canada for this guy, Jeff Tech, which is a crazy story because
No, I
Raz
can tell
was,
you that whole story. I know that whole entire story. I was
of
there,
course you do.
look at, and I still have all of the messages from me and Jeff Tech. So
That's
what
crazy.
happened was, there was a guy named Mohead Red. He was our friend Sean Rhodes. He ended up passing away, but he was also involved with the Cottonmouth Kings. He was a grower, but he also was involved in like the porn industry as well, right? And we gave Mohead Red gave Dirty Harry, the guy that taught me how to grow, the Afghani that hermed out, right? The Afghani bull rider is basically a feminized line, because what happened was that Afghani hermed, pollinated everything. That's how the Afghani bull rider came along. But what ended up happening is Dirty Harry gave a cut back to Sean, and Sean was friends with Jeff. And Jeff went down to his place in Lakeside and took a cutting from his backyard from one of the plants that was vegging. And then what ended up happening was he grew that out. Yeah, he was living in El Cajon at the time in San Diego. Jeff was. He grew everything out. He hermed out his whole entire room, and basically self-pollinated that Afghani bull rider clone. And then he took those seeds up to Canada and then started calling it bull rider, and started like the bull rider brand with S1 hybrids from a mistake grow.
Interesting. I had always heard that Andy got the cut for Jeff because he knew the guys. And Jeff always told the story that he crossed it to an Afghan and created Afghan Bull Rider. That was always his story.
Nope. No, I actually still have the text messages. And
It's
here's the
nice to
thing.
hear
So
the OG story, dude.
if you go and look at Cannabis Culture magazine from, I think it's August 2000, and I want to say 2006. I might be wrong. It might be 2008. I can't remember. It's right around there. But there's an article called "Introducing Afghani Bull Rider," and it was written by Jeff Tech. And I remember when it came out, because all our crew were stoked. They're like, "Dude, that's our fucking weed." And then we started reading it, and we're like, "Why the fuck is this dude?" The article was like, it was kind of meh, but it did like mention that variety, so we were like super stoked. But yeah, he basically got a clone. It hermed, made seeds. He took the seeds to Canada. That
That is
became the bull
hilarious.
in Canada.
I love getting to the true stories. I figured you might have some goods on that, and I always wondered. I'll have to get in touch with Raz and see what he has to say about all that. It's amazing how the stories. I mean, it's listen. People always want to, they want to be the guy. Everyone wants to be the guy, and so it's. I've watched it
Be the
happen time
center
and
of the
time again.
story.
What's that, Ryan?
I always want to be the center of the story. It's like such a common thing in
Yeah,
cannabis.
for me, I'm always like. Because people are like, oh, you stole that process from Mila. I'm like, no, no. Mila was a part. I learned her part. She'll always have her part. And Reinhardt was a part, and Eldon was a part, and Mark Rose was a part, and Rob and Dave were a part. And there's a ton of people
Well,
that were a part. I never wanted to rewrite the history. I always wanted the history to be preserved for whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it makes me look better or worse, or if it makes someone else looks better. It's not about that. It's about an accurate timeline story of how we got to be enjoying water hash, in today's day and age. And it goes the same with all of these different cultivars. I think we do a huge disservice to the industry and the community when we rewrite the history. It's just
Yeah.
not
I can
ideal.
say that the person that deserves credit for the Afghani bull rider is Dirty Harry, my mentor and teacher. And he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He's like probably one of the best growers that I've ever seen. One of a really good friend of mine. I wouldn't be where I am today without him.
Mm.
And he's one of the people that didn't make it through legalization. He grew for over 30 years before you know, he had to stop and go get a job, you know, being an electrician, you know, when he should be by all rights be growing weed. You know, that's what I've known him as, a grower. So it sucks because there's a lot of people that that were in this space for a really long time that aren't in it anymore. That
Yeah,
deserve
that's
to
a
be.
true story. Well, we'll have to maybe get him on one day and tell some stories.
That would be pretty cool, actually. I'll see if he'd be down.
Yeah,
But
absolutely, man. We're always
unfortunately,
happy to.
Hopper, you know, because Hopper is another friend of mine, and him and his partner, another guy that I worked with down in San Diego, he was one of the guys that were growing the P91. They started the very first dispensary in San Diego, which was called the Green Door. And it was like, you know, I was connected to all of these people, and I used to go down there and sell weed. And Hopper was the manager for the Cottonmouth Kings, and he's got a lot of really cool stories about, you know, weed back in the 90s, like, you know, like what they were growing and different stories of, you know, them coming up in the scene.
That's awesome. Yeah, we need to preserve those stories, man. It's like, fuck. Got to preserve those stories. It's important, I think. It's really cool that you had that background on the bull rider. It's crazy because the bull rider just hit Canadian market again. And I texted my friend Amy, who's a part of it. She's a part of the promotions of it. And I said, you should chime in on Hash Church right now because getting some real stories here.
Well, I did a project with John Green Bodie, and we took the Afghani rider and crossed it to 89 NL to the Northern Lights. And then we did a fem line, which is the Afghani bull rider crossed to Hazy Kush.
Sick. I want to try it all. Oh, so soon I'll be able to come down to the US. I'm just waiting on this waiver. Been waiting on it for about 30 years now. Funny enough, last time I came to the US was actually 1998 for a fish show at the Gorge. So hopefully I'll be able to come down there again in the near future and I can come spend time with all of you guys.
Any word on that yet?
No, no, I gotta wait for Homeland Security, I think, is who I'm getting a email from. And I get so many emails, I delete like 200 or 300 junk mails every day, like a couple of times a day. And I just don't want to miss that email. I'm going through them so carefully that I don't just like, delete it and then don't see that I've got the waiver. But we'll see how it goes. It's coming soon anyway. It is coming soon. Crazy history there, Brandon. Did you ended up getting into some trouble too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I've actually done 2 prison terms for weed. So back in 2006, I did my
Mhm.
first term and I got busted with a little $500,000 a year, you know, operation. Um, and then 2015, I got busted with my hash lab. And then let's see, 2006, I did 16-month prison term. And the whole thing was fucking crazy though. I got busted because the girl that I was engaged to, she started cheating on me with a cop, and then they set
Oh,
me up. Yeah, no, it's a crazy story, but yeah, dude,
dude.
it's wild. It's a crazy, crazy story, all the ins and outs of it. And I didn't know what was happening at the time. So it was like the FBI, internal affairs got involved. Like it turned into a huge fucking thing.
Jesus Christ, dude. And
Yeah,
so
it was
how
like a dirty cops were involved and shit. And then the thing is crazy because I was talking to my homeboy on the phone. And I had always been on the run from probation because when I was 18, I got set up by a CI and I got busted with like a 5 pound, like a 5 pack of like Mexican brickweed.
Mm,
Right. So I was like, that was when I was 18, but I was already growing. Like I was already I was like already in this space. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to fucking go get a job. And they wanted to put me on probation. So I just skipped out on probation. So like almost my whole entire adult life up until I was around 35, I was on either probation or parole. Right. And so like when I got fucking busted, I was on probation, right? When that shit happened. And since I was on probation, they were like listening to all of my phone calls while I was in jail. And I was explaining to my friend, I was like, dude, I think this cop set me up and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the fuck's going on. They actually ended up opening an investigation. I mean, I still went to prison and shit, and but eventually that cop ended up getting into a bunch of trouble too for like distribution of cocaine to minors and like all
Ooh,
this. It opened
karma caught up with him.
Yeah, dude, it opened up a whole can of worms after the fact. But it was crazy. And then 2015, totally unrelated, there was an incident with a neighbor, and I don't know what it was. The neighbor got into it with another neighbor or something. Cops end up showing up at my house, and I had like, and I'm out. Look, I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere. I live far from everywhere, just so I can do my own thing. They showed up to my house, and like, I had my hash lab set up. This was in the days when like shatter started getting really popular, and I learned how to make BHO back in 2003. So I was like, when it started getting really popular around like 2014, 2013, 14, I was like, dude, I already know how to do this. Let's make a fucking shatter brand. So I was like, had all my ovens and my fucking, my blasters, and I was just fucking doing the most. And just by fucking chance, they ended up at my house because of some unrelated incident, and I ended up doing an 18-month prison term for that one.
Fuck, I'm sorry to hear that, dude. That is absolutely unbelievable. I knew there was some. I wasn't quite sure of the extent. I hate to hear habitual florists spending any amount of time in jail whatsoever. It's just like the crime of crimes. And it does remind me that I hear a lot less of it, like we can all just complain about how terrible the legalization aspect of cannabis has been in both of our countries, but I definitely hear less of my friends going to jail for 5 and 10 year prison sentences like they used to down in the US. I just don't hear about it as much anymore in the world of cannabis. And so we gotta lean on that.
I always got like the minimum side of the sentences, but the whole thing is like, had I have known what I know now, I would have approached it completely different. I would have never made a plea deal. I wouldn't have even put in a plea. I would have asked for a letter of complaint from the injured party because they're claiming that there's a crime. And I found out later on that there was a bunch of Supreme Court rulings that basically says that, there can't be I can't remember the name of it, but it was basically Erie Railroad versus another person, and the courts ruled that person couldn't sue, like they couldn't sue the corporation. Anyway, this specific case law, I don't know all the facts around it. I've forgotten a lot of it, but essentially it's like it has something to do with like the way that they can prosecute, like the state can prosecute somebody as the state representing like a corporate entity as opposed to like an injured party, because if there's no injured party, there's no victim, there's no crime. It's just basically violation of a statute that you are like, I don't know. I guess it's weird the way
Tell that to
that it's
Guylain.
all.
Holy fuck. Oh man. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, dude. I mean, obviously, from former cannabis prisoner turned advocate for organic methods, how has that experience influenced your mission, to make sustainable growing accessible, especially for the home cultivators starting from scratch?
You know what? It was I went organic on a bet actually, because I ran the 2 gallon ebb and flow, the bucket systems, with the brain.
Dude,
and
literally
shit.
my next question was what drew you from hydroponics to living soil. So this is perfect.
Yeah, I started with those ebb and flow where you had the hydroton and you put a little rock wool in there, grew into the buckets, and then you had your secondary bucket or whatever. I did that for 11 years. And the reason why I changed, I didn't switch from hydroponics just to like organics. It wasn't like that. It was a transition from, I think I had a pump go out, or maybe it was an AC unit went out. I don't know what it was, but something died at like week 5 or 6 in the flower. Whole room went down. I lost whatever, $30,000-$40,000. I was like, fuck this. I can't have this happen. So I switched to soil, but I was still doing, nutrient salts. I think I was doing house and garden. I was doing their soil line or cocoa line, whatever it was. And I just switched so that way, it's just because there's the automations with the hydro setup. Like if one thing goes down, whether it's AC or it's your pump in one of your brains goes down and nothing gets fed for 24 hours, everything's dead. So I was like, I need to have more, I guess I need a comfort zone, like somewhere where if something goes wrong, it's not just going to take me out. So I switched to soil and fertigation salts. And then on a bet, Dirty Harry was like, I'm switching over to all organic, blah, blah, blah. He's all hyping it up. And I was all, fuck yeah, I'm going to do it too. And then I fucking switched it out and like my new spot. And then, he was like, oh, I was just kidding, bro. I was like, but, good weed. The weed was fantastic first round, but I was using like the Subcool mix. And I found out real quick that that's not a good mix. And then I tried a bunch of other things like the Coots mix and this and that. And I basically had to relearn about cultivation. I had to learn about microbiology. I had to learn about plant science because what I knew before was procedure and protocol, right? I knew like, oh, this is magnesium deficiency. But what I really knew was I knew how to follow the instructions, the SOPs, so that way I could replicate something over and over again. So I had all I had a solid foundation to work with, but I didn't know anything about actual growing plants. Like I had been doing it at this time for like 13 years, and so it was like, I realized that I didn't know anything about plant cultivation. I only knew basically recipes. And so I had to learn everything. I started reading, science textbooks and science white papers. And I got on the Probiotic Farmers Alliance Facebook page back in like 2014. And I just had to learn everything. I just had to relearn everything. And then I learned about microbiology and I learned about agronomy. And I think because I wasn't conventionally taught or I didn't go to college for this, my approach was like really holistic, where I'm taking all of the science from the microbiology side, taking all the science from the agronomy side, and then combining these things together to make, protocols that work synergistically together with nutrients, microbes, plant microbe interactions, soil nutrient and microbe interactions, and then nutrient plant interactions, and it's interesting. I don't know.
Well, I sure appreciate your ability to go out and learn and retain and then articulate back to, I've always appreciated your Instagram account and what you've been sharing. It's definitely super awesome to have you on Hash Church. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to learn. There's a lot of people that don't really know about this. If you were to sort of walk us through a simple bokashi setup and the biggest microbial magic that happens underground once it's applied to cannabis roots, for listeners experimenting at home that, maybe noobs or maybe experts, could you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so my approach is basically what I would call a biostimulant sandwich, right? So we're not only using like a fertilizer. So most people, they think of fertilizers as like diammonium phosphate, calcium nitrate, potassium phosphate, these things that are basically in your salt-based fertilizers. And on their own, they don't complete a whole picture. So carbon is the missing element to that. And so when you understand carbon, it's the basis of all life. All life is carbon based, and it functions interconnectedly with the way nutrients interact with other nutrients, nutrients interact with plants, nutrients interact with microbes. And so my cultivation practices, like when we're thinking about nutrients, okay, you're adding carbon to the nutrient regimens, and then you're adding microbes, and you're adding prebiotics, and you're adding like you're layering biostimulants, humic and fulvic acids, silica and calcium, right? Proper balanced nutrition, proper biology, all of these things, they function synergistically together. But it's the actual like what you need to do as far as like if you were using the products that we have, they're super simple, right? It's not complex as the science is. It's like we have different formulas for different stages of growth. We have a high nitrogen formulation, a complex, which is just an even distribution of NPK, and then a high flowering formulation. We have things, it's all humic and fulvic acid chelated nutrients. So it's organic nutrients that are bioavailable, and they have a higher use efficiency than conventional fertilizers without any of the negative environmental impact. Microbes that stimulate the soil microbiome and create enzymes and phytohormones and hydroxylate sidiophores that also chelate and keep nutrients available.
God, there's a lot going on. There's
There's
a
so much
lot
going
going
on,
on.
bro. Have you ever seen that meme with the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where his walls all covered up with, images with all the strings going here and there and there?
Oh yeah.
That's what I think of when we're talking about the complexities of all the things that are happening holistically as an organism when it comes to, like, again, new plant nutrient interactions, microbe plant interactions, nutrient microbe interactions.
Well, then humans getting it wrong. How about throw that one into the mix? Just like not able to collect the data correctly, making massive mistakes, and deciphering the information incorrectly is a whole other vector that gets tossed into it. And then those people generally become the bro science Instagram dudes that are like, I'm going to share this with everyone. And so
Well, you want to see something kind of crazy? So, like, I do different cultivation methods. Like, I have my dispensary and grow facility that's going to be coming online in about 30 days. And so we've got our garden beds in there, but I also do my home grow stuff. So I've got a couple of tents, I've got, my flowering room. But if you look at any way, like anywhere that you look where you see plants, it doesn't matter if it's in like a 1 gallon pot like this, or if it's in something like a little bed like this. It doesn't matter. It's like I use data for everything. And so what ends up happening is my shit always looks great. Even like little like test plot runs where I'm like testing genetics, like these things are at day 38 in this little tent here. And this is just little 1 gallons with clones that had no veg time. But if you know that, like, if you can look at the data and you can balance those nutrients in the soil properly, it's like, it makes it so easy to cultivate.
you got some Limarilla or some Mac V2 crosses in there?
So this one is the Blueberry Train Mac. So this is Trainwreck Blueberry MK Ultra.
That one is
Mac
so fire.
V2.
That one
Do you
is
have
really,
that cut?
yeah, I got past that one from a mutual friend, and it looks like cap. It looks like the Mac in terms of the frosting on it. It's just everywhere, but it's a blueberry haze. I mean,
Yeah,
well
it's
done,
blueberry
dude.
haze. That's a
Yeah.
really good description of it. It's got that mentholated vanilla blueberry thing going on in it. That cut that you have actually won first place Mississippi Cannabis Cup.
Yeah, and I've only run it outdoor, so I'd love to see it indoor.
Oh, it's fucking insane, bro. These are all F3s, so these are all testers. Of a bunch. I had like 11 different phenos that I ran outdoors, and then I did a run back in my beds, and then I wanted to see how they would do in small tents, and then I'm doing another run back in the beds in the big room right now. But yeah, dude, that blueberry Train Mac is fantastic, and that's what I look for is that blueberry type haze. So it's got that blueberry with that lemon, that funky lemon thing going on in the back.
I mean, it stood out in my entire catalog this year as the most frosty plant. It was like hands down. Like,
Dude, he's got some legendary ones. That Limelights. What's your secret sauce for selecting parent plants in an organic setup? How does soil health play into preserving those unique genetics across the generations?
How do you know about the limelight? Have you grown any of that out?
I keep my finger on the pulse, my friend. I keep my finger on the pulse. I have not
It's a
grown
nice.
that out.
Oh, it's a good one. That one is my Limarilla Mac V2, then taken back to Black Lime Reserve.
Fuck.
What I do for my male plants is I stress test them. So I don't pick anything that pre-flowers either in veg or under any type of stress condition. So if I get them root bound, and if they flower while they're root bound, I won't select them. And then I also nitrogen starve them. If they start to flower while nitrogen starved, I won't use those. I do that because anecdotally, I don't have data to back this up, but I feel that way it makes it so those plants don't harm. It keeps sexual stability. If those plants don't those male plants don't flower under stress conditions. And then another thing, a lot of my selection stuff is really like geared towards looking at the male plants. Are they nice and short and stout? Do they show auxiliary dominance as opposed to apical dominance? But one of the things is too is I can select really good plants because I know about balanced nutrition. So I set my target nutrient levels before I plant. And I do that with Logan Labs data. So I look at the data and then I top dress reamend exactly what needs to be there for that run. So that way my SOP is basically just adding additives. Like I'll add a little bit of calcium silica and some microbes throughout the grow and a couple of shots of humate fertilizer throughout, just to keep everything flowing and soluble and running. And one of the advantages that I think that I have is that with my cultivation style, I can dial in everything and kind of get a maximum expression. I'm never cultivating and like struggling with my grow. If you're struggling in a grow or you're trying to diagnose issues while you're pheno hunting, to me you're not going to be able to get the best expression. And so like everything is always consistent across the cultivation, right? Across the nutrients and the nutrient solubility and the balance of nutrients. So I get basically the same result every single time, and I can make really good selections that way. I think another thing too is I've got a really, really sensitive nose. One of the things that like bothers me, like if somebody ever does laundry and they don't change the laundry right away and put it into the dryer and it develops any just slight hint of mold, I can smell that and that sets me off. Like I can't be around. Like, so I have a super, super sensitive nose, and I think that might help also with, some of the selection to find some of the nuanced profiles and things like
Oh, I don't
nuanced
think
smell.
I think it's a guarantee, dude. That's 100%. I'm in the same boat. I tell people all the time, there's a lot more bad smells in the world than there are good. It's not it's a bummer to have a super sensitive nose. It's helpful in particular instances. For me, it always helped me find the best grown flower. I could just smell it. I could smell the work that was done in the room or the field or the greenhouse based on how it expressed itself. And so I think there's a lot to be said for that ability.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why things like Real Jack Rare, Trainwreck, Durban Poison, I love those things, and a lot of people relate it to smelling like, lemon pine salt or whatever, or lemon pledge. And it's like, and they give it this like one note profile. But if you were to put all those things in a line, I'd be like, this is distinctly different from this. Like the Jack, it's got an earthiness, it's got some sweetness to it. The Trainwreck is more acrid and more bright. The Derb is a little bit more earthy and a little more pine. And so I can pick up the distinctness between those, nuanced profiles where I feel like some people just are smelling one profile and they categorize it as Jack Terps.
Yeah. Well, microbiology is definitely your jam. Can you break down the sort of crop steering concept for us? How can growers use beneficial bacteria and fungi to steer a plant from veg to flower without synthetic inputs? And what are some of the pitfalls that noobs really want to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so I'll start with a pitfall. One of the things that you don't want to do, which I see a lot of people doing, is using molasses, right?
Mm.
Adding molasses into their soil. The thing is, your plants can't feed on sugars. Your plant actually photosynthesizes to produce sugars, which are then exuded out of the plant. The plant isn't trying to uptake more sugars, it's releasing those sugars to change the microbiome, to feed the microbes in the microbiome. Oftentimes, I understand that people are trying to stimulate the microbiome by adding molasses, but by adding a simple carbohydrate, what you're going to do is the most, dominant species is going to utilize that resource, and it's going to outcompete. So what you're going to do is you're going to swing the population towards one specific microorganism, and that microorganism is going to utilize all of that food, and then all of the other things that are there, the diversity actually dwindles, right? And if you are in a system where you might have fusarium or pythium or some type of pathogen or native microbe, and you add a simple carbohydrate, it's feeding something negative in that soil. So it's best to inoculate with a beneficial consortium rather than trying to add a simple sugar, right? Or it's better to add a prebiotic than to add in molasses, something like rice flour or wheat flour, or something like a carbon substrate that will naturally proliferate wide diversity of microorganisms, as opposed to just feed and letting the most strongest one kind of outcompete everything else.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I can say. But when it comes to the biocrop steering, so just like in agronomy, timing, when you apply the nutrients, where you apply the nutrients, and how much you apply all make a huge difference, right? And we look at this across all crops, whether it's corn, whether it's soy, whether it's specialty crops like tomatoes and peppers or flowers. Usually you use agronomic data. And what I've done is I've looked at some of the metabolites that microbes are producing. Let's take trichoderma, for instance. Trichoderma, the reason why I'm always saying, hey, use trichoderma, and use it at this point, and this point, is because even though it's known to suppress pathogens, it also produces the highest amount of hydroxamate sidiophores. And what a sidiophore is, it's an enzyme or a protein that essentially grabs onto nutrients, right? It keeps iron from oxidizing. So what will happen is you have a lot of nutrients that need to be in their reduced form to be available. As soon as they get exposed to oxygen, that nutrient is no longer available. The plant can't access it. But what happens is these metabolites that these microorganisms produce, they grab onto that nutrient and they keep it in an available form so that the plant can access it. So what happens in the case of like iron oxidizes really, really easily, and it also oxidizes if the pH is over 5.5. So it starts to convert with a higher pH, but our plants don't operate optimally in that 5.5 range. And so what's happening is you won't get that nutrient and it won't be soluble. But if you add in that microbe at that specific time during mid-veg, when you're starting to ramp up, chlorophyll production and biomass production, you need that access to that iron. You can add in that microbe, and what it'll do is it'll make it so that the iron that is there will be reduced, and then it will stay in a biologically available form. So you're not adding more iron because the iron's already there. It's just that iron needs to be converted. And so if you apply the trichoderma and the bacillus together during mid-veg, during transition, and then during, and then at like the second week of flowering, it's going to induce this response, right? And it's basically, it's called a microbe nutrient interaction, where what's happening is, just like cannabis produces these metabolites that affect us, it does the biochemical work. These microorganisms are also producing metabolites, and those are what's doing the actual biochemical work. So it's what that sidiophore is what's converting that iron and keeping that iron available, so that way the plant has access to it. And so knowing how much trichoderma you should use, knowing when to apply that trichoderma, and knowing where to apply that trichoderma and that bacillus is a part of biocrop steering protocols, to where you're using microbes to elicit usually a nutrient interaction.
Wow, that's just deep, dude. I love it. Absolutely love it. With cannabis legalization basically exploding for the newbies, it's terrible to hear about guys like your homie that's no longer doing it and has kind of been bumped out of that. I've seen a lot of that in California, but small scale organic growers are getting squeezed by big ag. How can Bokashi style methods level that playing field for boutique cultivators who are focused on, quality over quantity?
Well, the first thing we need to do is look at logistics, okay? I think that we all want to grow the best possible quality. That is a given. Nobody comes into this and goes, I'm going to fucking grow mids, right?
No
So,
shit.
but you also have to understand that you don't always need to have the best quality to have a successful business. Let's look at McDonald's, for instance. McDonald's, terrible fucking quality, but you know exactly what you're going to get every single time.
True.
The biggest thing is really understanding the logistics of your business. You have to be good at business. You can't just rely on having good quality weed. That mentality of good quality weed, I'll be okay if I can grow the best weed. Yeah, but everybody's growing the best weed now, and so you're competing in a market that is saturated with with most consumers can't tell the difference between mid grade and high grade because they don't have the capacity to understand
Or
from
can't afford the difference. I'll throw that little.
you know what I mean? Here's the thing. If I've got some fucking weed that I just trimmed up today, some outdoor weed. It is fucking I'm not gonna smoke it. I'll give it away. But if I took that same weed to my 17-year-old self, my 17-year-old self would be like, this is fucking fire. I just scored. I'm super stoked. It's because I didn't have a frame of reference at that time that I do now. And that's how I see the consumer, right? The consumer doesn't have a frame of reference to really know what's good. So what they want is basically what is going to work, get the largest quantity at the best price. That's consumer mentality. So you have to understand
Well,
consumer mentality.
yeah, no, you do. I mean, listen, for someone upgrading from say the Miracle Grow to not necessarily to living soil exactly. Like what's your 30-day transition plan to avoid shocking the plants and keep the terps popping for people that don't have that reference point but are growing and it doesn't have to necessarily be
You're
Miracle
talking
Grow
about, I thought you were
metaphorically.
talking about like running a craft business like the dispensary and grow. But look at the difference is huge, right? It doesn't take a lot. Most people overdo it and put too much thought into it. With our
Hmm.
product, it's really simple. Humates, for instance, I feed maybe once every 2 weeks and I don't have to pH anything. As long as you have a decent starting point, a decent soil, and you're doing your calcium silica and your microbes and you do humates every couple of weeks, it makes it super simple.
Hmm.
I think the biggest thing that new growers need to know is that LED lights are super powerful and you don't need to be running them at 100%. Also, when you're running LED lights, you need warmer temperatures and higher humidity. Is if your environment is on point and you have a decent media, you're going to have success with our products because they're already formulated to for the best use efficiency. So whereas you're not always feeding all the time and you're not creating runoff and it's simple and it's basic and it's easy and it's efficient.
Yeah. And it's awesome. Like, how about
Yeah.
that? And it's
It is.
awesome.
Well,
What
look at
about
this was
animal
the very
inputs?
first.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, so this product was actually developed. The humate fertilizer was developed by Dr. George. He was the structural engineering director on the Apollo space project. Now,
Mhm.
after he left NASA, he was private contractor. He worked for Monsanto. He built one of the largest sulfuric acid plants in the world, and they use sulfuric acid to make phosphorus fertilizer. But he was at the same time saying, "Hey, there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to do this." Nobody wanted to listen to him. So he engineered the chemistry, he manufactured all the equipment, he did everything from the bottom up. And the idea is not just to create a better fertilizer, but to create a product that can be used on exoplanets. Like he designed the first fertilizer to be used to cultivate in on extraterrestrial planets. Like that's what originally he developed these because he understood the dynamics between carbon and life, right? And so he developed a product that is more efficient than conventional fertilizers. It uses less energy. It uses waste product from coal mining to manufacture. So it's less strenuous on natural resources. It doesn't have any of the negative environmental impact. It builds long-term soil carbon. It builds long-term soil health and fertility. And that's what you need. You need to be able to build carbon into the soil for the microbiome to do what it's supposed to do naturally. To make all these natural processes function. more efficient, like the nitrogen cycle and the phosphorus cycle and the micronutrient cycling and the carbon cycle.
So, humic acid and carbon forward fertilizations are definite buzzwords in advanced growing circles. How do they supercharge our, I don't want to say terpene profile, I'll say volatile organic compound and cannabinoid expressions in cannabis?
Mostly through increasing nutrient use efficiency. So what happens is when we're talking about humic and fulvic acid, so humic acid is actually a class of compounds. It's not like one thing. Fulvic acid is the same thing. It's a class of compounds. The way that they are classified is by their solubility, right? Their solubility and their molecular size. So fulvic acid as a class has a high solubility. It is soluble across all pH ranges, 1 to 14. So at extremely acidic and extremely alkaline conditions, anything that's attached to fulvic acid nutrient wise can be delivered to plants or can be utilized by biology. The fulvic acid molecule is really, really small, so it can penetrate and translocate itself through root cells and through plant cells. So it can bypass basically active transport mechanisms. So the plant doesn't need to utilize energy to uptake these nutrients that are attached to fulvic acid. Fulvic acid is also small enough that it acts as a fuel source and nutrient source for biology. Because what's happening is all biology needs carbon for energy. And so what they're doing is they're catabolizing, they're destroying all these fulvic acid chains, and they're using the carbon for different metabolic processes along with the nutrients that are attached to that carbon. So it acts as a fuel source for microbes. Now, humic acid is a little bit different. It's only soluble in alkaline or higher pHs. So the nutrients in, let's say, a soil at 6 that's chelated to humic acid are not going to be immediately available. They'll increase the soil cation exchange capacity, or CEC, which is the ability for that soil to hold on to those nutrients, so it can allow for long-term availability or long-term release of those nutrients. But because the humic acid is a larger molecule, it's better for things like improving soil structure, which increases water retention, it increases gas exchange. And then it also, because of the improvement in soil structure, it can also, in the larger size, it can act as basically housing units or apartment units for microbes to live on. So they, and the thing is, both of these things, what they can do is they can actually coat the surfaces of like soil colloids, so it can help hold, nutrients onto the soil particles themselves, keeping them from like leaching out into our waterways.
I have a friend recently, Peter, a whole bunch of friends in my neighborhood here. They started a company, I think it's like Soleil something, but it's basically just that. They've managed to put these nutrients, they bind them to like husks of rice or seed husks, and they go into the soil and they don't leach out in the water. They don't leach away. They stay there for the entire. I'll try to find the link and send it to you. You definitely find it interesting. I can
We have
just
a
tell.
technology. We have a technology. It's a seed coating technology, and and what it does is it uses humic and fulvic acids. It uses a calcium source that's really it's really an attractant for water, so it really helps the seed absorb water. But what's happening is essentially you're coating the seed with nutrients and a biostimulant, so that way when it goes into the ground, it has so much more power. It's got nutrients, right? When it sprouts, it's got biology to help assist it, so you get stronger rooting and stronger seed growth.
Hmm. What looking ahead into the future, 5 to 10 years into the future, where do you see the microbiology intersecting with cannabis? Think AI monitored microbial teas or gene edited super fungi. Wild speculation is encouraged.
I honestly think it's going to go towards the biocrop steering that, I coined the term and then put together the protocols on which microbes should be used when. Because the thing is, what I've seen is, I've been doing these protocols actively for years now, and now the science is starting to catch up. So when I went to CanMed out in Puerto Rico earlier this year, I got to see a presentation. They talked about trichoderma and Beauveria bassiana as endophytic microbes that are colonizing the vascular transport tissues of the plant. Now, these are part of the two microbes that are in my biocrop steering protocols, and I kind of already knew that this was happening, but to be able to see the science and to see it like, hey, this is the science, and to have it validated what I've been talking about. What for so long, so many people are like, you just need a huge diversity, the bigger diversity the better, but I take a different approach where I'm saying, hey, let's look at specific consortiums that work synergistically together, and let's look at their metabolites. Just like if we're looking at cannabis, and I'm going like, well, I really like I really like Train. I really like that acrid, pungent, profile. That's what does it for me, right? Where it's because of the metabolites that it's producing. It's not just, oh, I need a bunch of different strains to get the effect that I'm looking for. I'm looking for one specific thing because that's what's doing the job. And with biocrop steering, that's what we're doing. We're looking at specific microbes and consortiums of microbes, not because of the microbe itself, but because of what that microbe produces. Because again, those metabolites are what are doing the biochemical work in that media. And so if we know that this specific microbe produces X, percent more phosphatase, it's going to liberate more phosphate from phosphorus material than any other known microbe, then this is what we should use if we're trying to promote an increase in phosphorus at this particular time. Because the thing, again, with phosphorus, it's like it has to be either cycled metabolically through microbial metabolism, or it has to be converted through chemical and elemental weathering. If we can promote that phosphorus without actually having to bring in phosphorus fertilizer, because that's often not what we need. We don't need more phosphorus fertilizer. We just need to solubilize what's there, right? We're going to use a specific microbe to do that, as opposed to just trying to throw the kitchen sink at it. So I think the approach that we'll see is we'll understand which microbes are doing what specific biochemical work, and then we'll be geared more towards like, how we have NPK levels at this much nitrogen at this time, this much phosphorus at this time, this much calcium at this time. I think what we'll see is this specific microbe at this time, this specific microbe at this time, to elicit these certain responses to get overall, health and quality increase, the resistance to pathogens and all that other stuff.
Well, you definitely have a great blend of scientist and storyteller in you, Brandon. I appreciate it for sure. If you could rewrite one rule in cannabis cultivation books, what would it be?
Ooh, one rule.
know,
Man, what
there's a
I'd really
lot.
I'd like to see the end of the HPS is better, because we just know it's not. Not with the technology that we have now, in understanding how HPS versus LED works functionally.
Mhm.
When it comes to things like the transpiration of water and nutrients, the amount of heat at canopy, or the amount of infrared light versus the lack thereof. Like, once we understand those types of things, like, we just need to come to more efficiencies, right? Everything that I do is based off of logistic, right? So let's change the way that we think of things from a logistic standpoint. Like, I don't grow organically from a point of, I need to save the world. I need to save the world. I'm doing this because I'm better, or I have an ego or anything. It's strictly logistics, because when it comes down to it, I find it kind of egotistic to think that like we're going to destroy the earth. The earth will be here it's been here way before us. It'll be way after us. Like,
I feel the same way.
I'm so not worried about that. And so I'm not taking like this really like hippie approach. I'm really taking a scientific and logistics approach, right? How do we create the best logistic efficiencies with what we're doing, especially if we're relying on this for income, right? If we're running a commercial facility, how do I decrease my overhead to increase my profitability without sacrificing yield or integrity?
Yeah, it's not an easy game, that's for sure. I mean, even just talking earlier with Chimera in regards to the breeding aspect and being like, oh, we're going to breed for this. But it's like, oh, what about the other guys that are going to come in when you find those particular gene synthases that you want to use? What about the accompanying ones? You know, it ends up being an extremely complex idea to even sort of take this on. And I've always felt like if you have the fungi intelligence in your corner, that you probably, you know, as long as you can understand it and have an understanding of what it's doing, that you have an advantage over people that don't. I mean, how could you possibly know when to give the plant, what it needs, where it needs it, how it needs it, and how much it needs when the fungi intelligence can really do a lot of that for you?
And when you're talking about logistics and using microbes in conjunction with nutrients, right? So a good example is it's gonna cost you about $1.20 to $1.40 per yard of soil to do a top dress reamend. So if you're running a facility that's got, 100 yards of soil in a greenhouse, it may only cost you 110, 120 bucks to reamend that whole entire greenhouse for the next, 3 months of growth, right? With your top, as long as you're using the type of nutrient balancing methods where you're collecting data and you're doing it efficiently, it's like you can't beat that cost efficiency. You can't $1.20 per yard of soil, right?
It seems impossible.
It's not though, and that's it. It's like all of those small things combined together. Okay, let's look at our light efficiency. Well, are we meeting our DLI without having to run our lights at 100% the whole cycle? Like we can, if we look at all of the small things in conjunction, they all add up, and it all adds up to profit. And
Mhm.
that's the only way. And then another thing too is like when it comes, one of the things that I also would like to see change is the idea that the customer is always looking for something new, because that's absolutely not true. And I see so many brands that are just want to pheno hunt. Oh, we got to find the next best thing, the next new thing. Why don't you find 6 things that you can grow really really well, and that is your menu. McDonald's doesn't change their menu every week or every month. You know what I mean? Do something, find it. Look at it. People want to say that, like, oh, we need to find the next best thing, the next best thing. Then how come Blue Dream, which is in my opinion mids, is the number one seller across the country, right? If you look at the analytics, whether you're in California or Michigan, oh, Blue Dream happens to have the best sell through at all dispensaries across the nation. Okay, well then why don't you just grow Blue Dream? And if you know it's going to sell, then let's stick to that one thing. Or like, that's
Mhm.
what you do. It's all it was before the grower told the consumer what they liked by what they grew. And for 15 years, we grew the exact same thing. It didn't switch. And our customers never complained. They were happy because they knew exactly what they were getting. It was consistent. I think it's more about building consistency with what you have. For me, when our place opens up, we're going to have our fruit strains, we'll have our OG, but we're only going to have 6 house things. So you might be able to get a blueberry Trey Mac, you might be able to get Chem D, you might be able to get a Blue Dream, but those things aren't going to change. We're only going to have those flavors. That's what we do. That's it. It might change once a year. Like we might move, like switch one of them out because it's not doing so well or something like that. But the idea for us isn't to always trying to look for something new. It's to find something that's stable, that works really well and has a good sell through that people can create a connection to, right?
Yeah. No,
The reason
absolutely.
why
People want to try too many. They want to have the hundred and oh, everyone wants new flavors all the time. And you're right. You know, look at Blue Dream and look at its popularity. I often think of some of these cultivars. I mean, first of all, you know, when you say Blue Dream, I think it's mids. Well, the majority of the people who consume cannabis aren't connoisseurs. And as legalization opens up more and more and more, the majority of people who consume cannabis are becoming even the polar opposite of a connoisseur. And I often wonder, I've mentioned this a few times in regards to obviously we experience these cultivars, some may be the same, most may be quite different depending on our olfactory, depending on our sensitivities, depending on our blind spots, you know, volatile organic compounds that we can't perceive. Certain people just can't perceive things. You see it with the herb there, I'm spacing the name on it right now, the one you put on the tacos, and people taste soap in it, and some people
Oregano.
just love it. Exactly.
Cilantro.
Yeah,
Oh,
cilantro. And so you
yeah.
just an herb like
I'm one of the
cilantro.
soap guys.
I'm a soap guy as well for cilantro, but it shows you, it teaches you about sensory science and perception, right? Not everyone is smelling and tasting the same things. And that's just with a simple herb like cilantro. There's a whole variety out there. And I sometimes think that things like Skittles and Blue Dream, they hit a wider swath of the population where the population can actually taste it. And they're like, oh, wow, you've got a population out there who's just drinking coffee and smashing alcohol and smoking cigarettes to the point where their olfactory is burnt out. It's barely working, and so they can't smell a lot of things. And I often think that's another reason why botanical terpenes are so popular, because people, they taste it and they're like, oh, this one tastes like pineapple. It's like it's for the first time in their life they're tasting something in their weed, because their weed just tastes like weed to them. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but I often, think about it. And sorry for, to the rest of the room for taking up all the time and firing off 100 questions at Brandon at once. If Dutch or Etienne or Caleb has anything to say, uh, please feel free to chime in. I've just been, I had a whole bunch of different things I wanted to ask Brandon, and he's just been like, it's like answering them so quickly and awesomely. I appreciate you for that, Brandon,
Yeah, of course.
in a big
No,
way.
I think it was a great conversation and good questions, and I haven't really caught up with Brandon in a while, unfortunately. We used to spend a lot more time talking about different things
Dude, you're the
online.
reason he's in the room.
Yeah, no, it's been a minute, so it's cool to hear what you're doing, and um, it's a really interesting work. Like my approach to it is compost, right? Like I achieve these things through compost, and specifically composting my cannabis, right? So I grow cannabis in soil, in actual earth, and do all the things that I can do to help that. And as it grows up, it pulls the nutrients within itself, and then I can compost that, and I'm reapplying those nutrients. And so I'm condensing the nutrients that are available in my system over time, amongst other things. But just as I was hearing you talk about, creating creating those nutrients and getting them available, at the same time, I think it's fucking brilliant, dude, because it's, also the way that I do it, that I have this advantage is I'm in a big pot or in the ground. So I have a bigger pool of nutrients, and the plants can move around and they can get away from my mistakes, more often than not. That if I over top dress, or if I do something over water or whatever, underwater, they can get away from those mistakes. But when you get into a pot, of any size, even like a bed that you were showing in your tent, a 2x2, it complicates things, and so the more that you can delve in and get that research and anticipate what the plants are going to be needing, you're gonna help them, it's in a large part. So I appreciate it, man.
I think a lot of it is just like not overdoing it. I think a lot of people just go too hard, and a lot of people just, I think people want to be more involved in the actual process than what you need to. Because, like, for me, a lot of what I do is just like stare at plants, right? Because I'll go in there, like, my lights will turn on. I don't need to, I probably could go a week without going into my room and it would be fine, you know? But it's like I go in there and I look at them and I'm like, oh, but there's nothing for me to do. I don't need to water. I don't need to feed anything. I don't need to, I don't need to do anything. I'm literally just in there to look. And I feel like sometimes, especially if you're new, people will just, oh, I got to feed them again. I got to feed them again. I got to do this. I got to, and just too much, just doing too much can complicate it.
Yeah, and I think that's we were kind of talking about that earlier before you came on, like just the weighing out. I was talking about having a nice hashtag machine to make bubble hash, right? It's got all this stuff, and it spent a few days setting it up, and then kind of ran into some problems, just learning how to use the machine, and doing things a little different. And and I was like, oh man, think of how much hash I could have made in the last 4 days. But just if I was just in a bucket, you know what I mean, going all day, But it just, it's definitely going to be a more efficient system once I have it all up and running and everything. Obviously, that's why I'm, doing a system like that. But there's always some just like, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just talking.
I just filled up 11 27-gallon totes today. I'm like, if this was you know, the late 90s, I'd be weed balling right now.
Right. What new cultivars are you working on?
So I've been hunting through F3 Blueberry Train Max. I'm gonna be getting ready to do F4s soon. But I just popped some more of the Black D, which is Chem Dog Black Lime Reserve.
Dude, I bet that
I
one's
actually,
fire.
dude, they're nice, bro. The high on it is fucking fantastic, bro. It is so good. I have one that's like a little sweeter. It doesn't have any of the garlickiness or any of that. It's really sweet. Yeah, it's fantastic high. It's not a keeper or anything. Like it couldn't go into commercial production. The one that I have that I kept, but I just love the fucking high on it. It gets me stony baloney, bro. It gets me like head high stoned, like go to watch comedy and just be fucking cracking up. You know what I mean?
I do. Well, interestingly, Gene made a Hindu lime fem, and I ran a bunch of them. And holy shit, the hit that is the same sort of concept. Just a little bit of the lime in there with the Hindu. I found some ones that were just like eyes closed, just enjoying my fucking life as I was smoking that shit. Um, you know, and that's kind of like when we were talking about stepping back, all the marker assisted breeding and stuff, and it's a huge tool, but end of the day, our bodies, we have to smoke this shit, and that's one thing I've learned in scaling down from having a bigger facility where I could run a ton of plants, and I was running 1,000 of each cultivar, 500 of each cultivar, and it's so much work and so much to look at. I definitely couldn't smoke each pheno, so I was having to make choices based upon smell and structure and other things, and now that I'm slowed down and smaller, I'm smoking through them all, and I'm like, God damn it, I would have missed this for sure if I hadn't have smoked it. You know what I mean? And I'm just kind of realizing how many opportunities I have missed in that. And so I think that I'm not trying to dog on science. It kind of might seem like that theme over the conversation where I've kind of like tried to bring it back to what humans can do, but I think pairing the two together is where it's going to be really magical. But like I so value our experience and our ability to judge and discern, like
So,
we
so let's say
go
you do
ahead.
your initial selection, right? So let's say you do your initial selection, you pick your winners, and you didn't pick anything based off of science. You picked this based off of your anecdotal experience with the cultivar. And then afterwards you go and see, oh, hey, this one actually has this or this in it. Cool. I'm gonna keep working with this one. So it's like I think that if we make our initial selections based off of our olfactory senses, and the way that it makes us feel and everything else, and then we go and do the science on it, because that's kind of like what I did. Like I already know what I like when I went and took samples, leaf samples, and sent them to medicinal economics. We're talking about F3 Blueberry Train Max, so I've already gotten like 4 years of work with this specific cultivar. I know how it's going to affect it. Now I can actually go and look and see like what's happening from a science side too. I would have selected this line regardless of whether or not the science said. But if we can introduce that science and find something cool that we're seeing passed on through progeny, that's something that we could like basically say like you know to our people in our descriptions of this variety. Oh, hey, this one shows the COG7 mutation, so it might have better resistance to hop plate.
Right.
Yeah.
Or narrow it down to like, here's your population of 10,000 seeds. We have 100 that have this gene that will resist against powdery mildew, let's say, and then we grow those out, we smoke them, and we're like, well, actually, we like 17 and 27 and whatever, right? And we kind of can use our senses in both aspects of it,
Because I think it'd be hard to be like, okay, I'm going to phenohunt this just based off of genetics. I'm not going to use my physical senses. We're going to look at, okay, number 12 has it, number 20 has it, number 32 has it. And then you go and look at those ones, and those are like, oh, those aren't even the fucking ones that I would have chosen. Like,
right?
You know what I mean? And
you're
so,
like, start again.
yeah. And so it could make, again, it just depends on what you're doing. But as far as my breeding work right now, I'm getting back into the high divorce rate limelight, which is the Limarilla cross to the wedding cake Mac. And then I did a bunch of work this last season that just ended, and I did the Starfighter cross to Miracle Alien. I took me 1 year to find the right female, but I found one that does phenomenal indoors and outdoors. She shows resistance to those pathogens. So I made F2s of that, and then I used the male of that line on a couple other crosses. And then I took the ChemD BLR back to ChemD. I took the ChemD BLR, I made F2s. So right now I'm doing chem and Gorilla Glue stuff. So I have like the Stardog Gorilla Glue I'm trying to pop. Mostly just the chem. You know me. My lane is basically the lime stuff, like the Limarilla, which is the Gorilla Glue Black Lime Reserve, and the ChemD BLR and the Blueberry Train Map. Those are essentially, that's pretty much all I work on. I might venture outside of that, but with line work and stuff like that, that's all I'm working on. Lime and the blueberry stuff. That's my lane. That's what I like.
It sounds like it's enough.
It really is, man. And I'm not a seed bank, so I'm not relying on seed drops and stuff for like income. It's good to have that as extra. But so it's like it takes me a while to make stuff because I have a process where I'm like, I run things a couple of times, I run them back before I do the selections, and it takes me, I fucking run everything personally. So it's like I have to like hunt everything out. I gotta look through the lines, and then some stuff I like, like the gas F2, the Starfighter cross to Mac F2s. Like I'm not actually even selling those. It's just an F2 of caps work. So those things I've just been giving away, giving them out with orders and stuff like that.
Beautiful.
But it takes a long time, man. And I don't have a ton of space, because, I have my home grow. I have a bunch of tents. I got my flowering room. I got my veg spot and stuff. But I gotta I have to run through everything, and it takes months and months. So like all the seed stuff that I have packaged up right now, like it probably won't get dropped for another, starting at least 3 months on the stuff that I'm just growing out right now. And then
I
it'll
gotta
be another.
peek out, guys. I just had my mother-in-law show up with my kids, so sorry to cut you off, but good
No
conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for
I'll
coming
talk to you
on,
soon.
Dutch. Much appreciated for sure. That was great conversation today. Holy shit. Definitely gonna have to get you back on for some more. Poor Etienne's
Yeah.
been in a
I
hospital
think I'm
bed
gonna
the
head
whole
out
time.
to it's I gotta get back to doing some work around the house.
Well, I really appreciate it. We usually go for 4 hours. I think today I'm just gonna go for 3, do another 8 minutes, chat it up with Caleb and Etienne, and we'll be in touch. Brandon, where can everyone reach you? You want to go over the
So
information
you can
again?
find me on YouTube at Full Crop Science. We just dropped a podcast on ionomics, which is, with the group that we're going to be working with doing some cannabis research. You can also find me on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the platforms, Full Crop Science with one L.
Yeah, Bullcrop Science dot and then underscore, right? Instagram's brutal. If I don't put the exact name in, nobody will be able to find it.
Yeah, my website's bokashiearthworks.net. We just got our trademark on Full Crop because we couldn't get one for Bokashi, so that's why we transitioned. So we'll be changing our web domain here soon as well.
Well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing with us on such short notice, dude. We'll definitely do it again soon. And yeah, if you want to bring in some of your homies from San Diego back in the day, we can do that as well.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun, actually. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, brother.
Peace.
Mucho appreciation. Well, there it is. That was fun. It's kind of fun to just like mostly listen for an episode. I felt like I learned a
We
lot,
do
dude.
this all the time. We listen. I mean, that's why I come back all the time. I'm learning every episode, right? I may be in his hospital bed, but I'm still learning, all the time, as well as, learning about new problems, new solutions, ideas. And then years later, we see the solution in action, you know what I'm saying? So we don't realize sometimes the influence we have, as well as, on Friday, Berkeley Patients Group turned 26 officially.
Unbelievable.
That was our
Congratulations on
birthday.
that. That's huge.
I hated to do it from my hospital bed, but shout out to everybody who's worked for us and made 26 years possible. Much love and respect. Because yeah, it's 22 of those years we spent in legal battles.
Oh my God, dude.
So, I'm not asking for any more anybody,
No
but
more legal
it's
battles?
just yeah, well, the same thing when you pioneer, you get a lot of arrows in the back sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's a hard road. So respect to you and respect on 30 years with the missus. That is nothing short of amazing that she tolerated you for 30 fucking years and then bore beautiful children that have only brought joy to your life. So yeah, you're a very lucky man.
I definitely am. I definitely am. I got to figure something out here. This is the first time in the 36 years that I've been with my wife where I have had nothing planned for my anniversary. It's just was too overwhelming this year. I just
I sent you some suggestions.
Yes, appreciate it. I think I probably would, maybe need a little bit more time because today is the day, but I did manage to take her to Joffrey Lake 5 or 6 days ago and go on a beautiful hike with the whole family, all of our kids, and that was for her birthday. So it's always a tough one because it's her birthday and then 10 days later it's our wedding anniversary. So it's a lot. I've been kind of stressing it a little bit. I'm feeling a little let down that I didn't get my shit together a little bit better, but I guess I have the rest of the day to prove myself. We'll see how it goes.
Right on, right on.
In the meantime, I definitely want to shout out everyone for watching, for spending all this time. We had 300 people basically spending the last almost 3 hours with us, and I think it was a great conversation today. Next week, I have the Arcana boys. So, Fiji, Ghost, Kaya, Josh D, Chemdog. This is this new breeding group. They were written about in High Times recently. They're definitely a ton of superstar breeders, and they're going to come and share with us. And hopefully, we'll have some good questions. If you guys have any questions for them, set them up in advance, and I'm happy to ask them anything that you guys want. And of course, I want to thank the Press Club for always being such an awesome partner and sponsor here at Hash Church, as well as the boys at Puffco, boys and girls at Puffco. Never forget the girls, Chelsea, and so many amazing women that work at that company. Make it tick and make it work. So, really big shout out to Jolly Roger and the whole team at Puffco for always supporting us. They've been a massive support and sponsor for Hash Church this almost this whole year, and we appreciate you guys. And of course, shout out to Bubble Bags as well. We're doing what we can for Hash Church as often as we can. So, yeah, I would say, as always, may the full mouth bless your bowl sooner than later. And please get better fast, Etienne. I know you're getting let go here right away, but go home, give the wife a squeeze, and take care of that hip because that is no fun. And really appreciate you showing up today as well, Caleb. It's always nice to have some familiar faces in the room while we go over, having some new guests. So We'll talk soon, everybody. We'll see you next week, November 9th, with another show. And my God, we'll be at episode 45. I think that's 7 episodes left for the entire year. We did 52. We'll have done 52 episodes of Hash Church this year. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon. Peace out.
Bye.